Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on into the stream and welcome to the show. Hope everybody's having themselves a wonderful day. Hello. I'm just saying hi, just to start off with. So today, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be reading a book. And we're going to have ducks going. It's going to be fun. Something different. It's something I'm calling Science Sunday. And yeah, we're just going to see how this goes. This is a book I read a long time ago, and I freaking love this book series. We're reading The Day My Bum Went Psycho. The first of 3 books, I believe, in this series, written by Griffiths. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good time. Am I nervous? Most definitely. This is something completely different. But obviously, before getting going, just wanted to say some other words about things which have completely just lost my my state of frame. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's gone. Doesn't matter. Basically, the idea is we're going to change over. We're going to get ducks, and yeah, we'll get reading and we'll go from there. So that's right. There's a reading category on Twitch now, isn't there? I'll change over, but for now, let's bring up the ducks. No worries, Josie. Have yourself a nice walk. Also, I don't think there is a reading category. That's fine. Okay. We're doing random frame drops again this morning, friends, and I don't know why. Literally nothing's different to yesterday, and it was perfectly happy, so... Okie dokie. For just a few more minutes, let me just quickly check in just a couple of things here. Alrighty, let's get going with all good books in chapter 1, Midnight Bum Rally. I should probably say again, the book we're reading today, we're not going to probably read all of it, but this is The Day My Bum Went Psycho by Andy Griffiths. Chapter 1. Midnight Bum Rally. Zach Freeman woke off... Wow, off to a really good start there, friends. Zach Freeman woke out of a deep sleep to see his bum perched on the ledge of his bedroom window. It was standing on two pudgy little legs silhouetted against the moon, its little stick-like arms outstretched in front of it, so it was ready to dive. Zach sat up in bed. "No!" he yelled. "Come back!" But it was too late. His bum jumped out of the window and landed with a soft thud in the garden bed below. Zach stared out of the window and sighed. "Oh no," he said. "Not again." This was not the first time Zach's bum had run away. Since his 12th birthday, 2 months ago, Zach's bum had made a habit of jumping off his body, and running around the streets making a nuisance of itself. Zach was sick of it. So was the local bum catcher who'd already caught and impounded it 3 times. Until recently, Zach's bum had confined itself to a variety of harmless pranks, such as attaching itself to the faces of statues and passers-by. But on its last outing, it had joined a pack of 500 feral bums who had lined the emergency stopping lane of the Southeastern Freeway and mooned all the people driving to work. This stunt had caused many accidents, which the bums had thought was a great laugh. The sentencing judge, however, was not amused and placed them all on 12 months good behavior bonds. Zach knew he had to catch his bum himself this time. If the bum catcher got involved, he would have to report it, and Zach's bum would end up in jail for sure. And there was no way Zach wanted to spend every second weekend visiting his bum in jail. Zach threw back the blankets and was about to get out of bed when he heard his grandmother call from the next room. "Zach," he said, "is that you?" "Yes, Gran," said Zach. "It's all right. Go back to sleep." "What was that noise?" said his Gran. "Have they resumed firing?" Zach rolled his eyes. "There's no war, Gran," he said. "Go back to sleep." Zach was living with his grandmother while his parents were away. They both played in the wind section of the National Symphony Orchestra and went on tour 3 or 4 times a year, during which Zach would have to stay with his grandmother, sometimes for up to a month at a time. He loved his grandmother, but sometimes he wondered who was looking after who. "No war?" said his grandmother. "You mean the war is over?" "Yes," said Zach. He was used to this conversation. She was always talking about the war. Zach wasn't sure which war she was talking about, or how long ago it had happened, or whether it even happened at all. All he knew was that it seemed real to her. "Did we win?" "Yes, Gran," said Zach. He figured out that she would go back to sleep quicker if he just agreed with everything she said. "We creamed them." That's good," said his grandmother. "I'll take over the watch. You get some rest. You've earned it, soldier." "Yes, Gran," said Zach. He couldn't tell her the truth. It would be bad enough talking to his parents about his bum, let alone his grandmother. He waited a minute until he could hear her snoring, and he got out of bed. With difficulty. It wasn't that easy. It wasn't that easy moving without a bum. Zach walked across the room to the window, leaned out, and peered out into the night. He saw his bum standing on the tips of his toes at the end of the driveway, as if sniffing the air. It was looking up and down the street. There was still time to catch it, but he had to be quick. Zach climbed out of the window and tiptoed down the driveway. As he got closer, Zach realized he wasn't the only one trying to catch his bum. Mittens, his grandmother's cat, was crouched on top of the front fence, ready to pounce. "Oh no," said Zach. He wasn't sure who was in more danger, Mittens or his bum. Mittens was always catching birds and mice and leaving them half-chewed on the front doorstep. But she had never caught a bum before. Well, not as far as Zach knew anyway. And a half-chewed bum on the doorstep wouldn't be something you'd likely not you'd be likely not to notice. Still, he didn't want to take any chances. Before Zach had time to do anything, however, Mittens leaped, but Zach's bum was faster. It bent over, aimed itself directly at Mittens, and fired a loud, deadly stream of gas. Mittens fell to the ground. Zach's bum took off the street, its little arms and legs pumping away like pistons. Zach was shocked. He knew that his bum had gone feral, but he'd never seen it kill anything before. He had to get it back. He knew that once a bum gets a taste for killing, it's very difficult for them to stop. But first, he had to try and help Mittens. Zach hobbled over to her body and knelt down. Poor Mittens was in a bad way. Zach pulled her head back, pinched her nostrils, and was preparing to give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when Mittens coughed. She wasn't dead after all. She had just been stunned. Zach breathed a sigh of relief. So my bum's not a killer, he thought. Not yet, anyway. In the distance, he could see the dark shape of his bum disappearing over the top of the hill. He got up, pulled the cord of his pajama pants as tight as possible, and he ran after it. As he ran, Zach cursed his luck. All he wanted was a bum that would settle down and just be a bum. A bum that wouldn't embarrass him in public at every possible opportunity. A bum that wouldn't make rude comments whenever he tried to talk to girls. And at the very least, he'd settle for a bum that just didn't jump off his body and gas cats in the middle of the night. By the time Zach got to the top of the hill, his bum was already halfway down the other side, heading towards the local football oval. And it wasn't the only one either. Zach couldn't believe what he was seeing. There were bums everywhere, pouring into the oval from all directions. It was an amazing sight. Bums. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Big bums, small bums, fat bums, scrawny bums, pimply bums, hairy bums, big wobbly bums trotting along on little white legs, tiny baby bums crawling across the ground. Every sort of bum you could imagine was heading towards the oval. Zach was amazed. He'd never seen so many bums without their owners attached. But why? He wondered what was going on. Zach crept quietly down the hill in the darkness and across the road to the wooden fence surrounding the oval. A large group of bums was approaching him from the left. Big bums, and they looked mean. Zach looked around for somewhere to hide. On the other side of the oval was a large grandstand, but it was too far away. To his right, however, there was a small wooden hot dog stand. Zach hesitated. The bums were getting close. He dived over the counter. "Hey, Jeff. How's it going? Welcome on in." To this book reading session. The group of bums passed him by, muttering excitedly. Zach couldn't understand what they were saying, but he could smell it all right. He didn't dare to poke his head up for at least 5 minutes after they had passed. When he finally did look out, he was shocked. In front of him was a sea of bums. Bums filled every bit of space in the oval, as well as the grandstands on the far side. Zach looked out for his bum, but couldn't pick it out from the crowd. It didn't really have any distinguishing features, apart from the fact that it was small and pink. But as he looked, the crowd began to part and gasp. "Look, there he is," said one bum. "It's him," said another. "Our leaders," said a third. For a moment, Zach thought they were talking about him, but then he realized they were looking past the hot dog stand. He turned around and strained to catch a glimpse of whoever or whatever it was they were looking at, but there were too many bums in the way. And then he saw it. It was a bum. But not just any bum. It was small and pink and strangely familiar. It was his bum. There we go. Zach couldn't believe it. He watched as his bum made its way through the crowd. It passed directly in front of the hot dog stand. As it passed, the other bums would reach out and try and touch it like it was some kind of celebrity. Occasionally, Zach's bum would... Let me start that sentence again. Occasionally, Zach's bum would reach one... No, this is a real book. This is a book I read when I was in high school. Occasionally, Zach's bum would touch one of the hands extended towards, but mostly it was protected by a group of 4 bum guards. 2 walked in front of it, pushing aside any bum that tried to get too close. The other 2 followed a few paces behind, protecting it from the rear. Zach's bum reached the scoreboard, climbed up a small ladder, and walked across a narrow platform that ran along the bottom. Correct. When it reached the middle of the platform, it stopped. The bum guards remained on the ground and formed a line to keep the crowd from surging towards. One of the guards was shining a torch on Zach's bum. The light shining on it from below made it look quite sinister. Zach wiped his brow. This can't be happening, he said to himself. It can't be happening, it can't be happening. But it was happening. Zach's bum raised a bum trumpet to its mouth and blew a long, loud note. The crowd became silent. This book inspired a TV show by the same name. Then, Zach's bum began to speak. Brothers and sisters, it said quietly, you know why I have called you here. So let's get straight to the point. For far too long we have been forced to do the dirty work for the human race. For too long we have been laughed at, smacked, pinched, kicked, sat on, and generally regarded figures of fun. For far too long we have been denied our rightful place on the top of the neck where we belong. There was an enormous cheer from the crowd. Zach blocked his nose and wiped his eyes. When one bum talks, it was bad enough. When thousands of them talk at the same time, well, it's not pleasant to say the least. After a few minutes, the cheering died down. But what can we do? Said a bony bum in the front row. We're just bums. Zach's bum stepped to the edge of the platform, the torchlight making it look more sinister than ever. No, my friend, it said. Divided, we are just bums, but united, we have the potential to be the most powerful force on the planet. Right now, on an island in the sea of bums, bums from all over the world are working around the clock to fill an extinct volcano. When it is full, it will become the greatest bumcano in the history of the world, and when it erupts, it will be devastating enough to knock out every human being on Earth. Zach's bum paused, enjoying the dramatic effect as its words had on the assembled bummery. That, my brothers and sisters, it said, will be when we strike. We will swap places with the heads and assume our rightful position at the top of the neck. By the time the humans come to, the age of bums will have begun and there'll be nothing anybody can do to stop us. The bums began cheering again. Zach lowered himself behind the counter and grimaced, trying to make sense of his bum's crazy plan. Bums taking place of heads, heads taking place of bums. The idea made Zach's stomach turn. His bum had to be stopped. He had to tell the local bum catcher what was going on, even if it meant his bum would end up in jail. But how could he get to the bum catcher, wondered Zach. He was stuck in a hot dog stand surrounded by thousands of deranged bums. He wasn't going anywhere. He peeked over the top of the counter. Just then, a bum ran screaming through the gates, followed by the bum catcher. Help! Called the bum. He's got a bum magnet! The bum catcher was holding what looked like a mini satellite dish in his outstretched hand, but as he entered the oval, he stopped dead in his tracks, obviously stunned by the huge number of bums in front of him. He dropped the bum magnet and started to back away, but it was too late. The bums closed in all around him. Please, no, he begged. Let me go. Bring him to me, commanded Zach's bum. Two of the bum guards shoved their way through the crowd, and Zach watched in horror as the bum guards grabbed the bum catcher and dragged him, kicking and struggling, back towards the scoreboard. Help! Yelled the bum catcher as the bum guards dragged him up the ladder to the platform where Zach's bum had been standing. The sight of the bum catcher seemed to enrage the bums. They were booing, hissing. The air stank with their poisonous fumes. brown blobs were flying through the air and splattered on the back of the scoreboard. The bum guards dropped the bum catcher on the platform in front of Zach's bum and moved away. Zach wondered whether he should try to help him, but he was too scared. There must have been 10,000 bums out there, even supposing he convinced his own bum to give up his plans for world domination, and that was a big if. He didn't like his chances of trying to convince the other bums. They were in an ugly mood, and judging by the smell of the air, getting uglier by the minute. "Stand up, bum catcher," said Zach's bum. The bum catcher slowly stood up. His legs were trembling. "Let me go," he gasped. "Please." "Why would I do that?" said Zach's bum. "So you can catch us all?" "I was just trying to help you," said the bum catcher. "Help us?" said Zach's bum. "And how exactly were you trying to help us? By sucking us up with your bum magnet? By shooting us with your bum guns? By holding us in your cages like common criminals?" "All I'm interested in is trying to get their bums back to their owners," said the bum catcher. "It's my job." Zach's bum turned to the crowd. "Owners," it spat. "Owners! Did you hear that? That is exactly what this rally is all about. Bums are not slaves. We are not owned by anybody." "But a bum without an owner is just a bum," said the bum catcher. At that, the bums resumed their boos and hisses and launched a fresh round of missiles at the bum catcher. Zach's bum turned to the crowd and put up its hands. "Enough!" it said. Then it turned back to the bum catcher, touched his shoulder. "I'm sorry you feel that way," it said, "but that's understandable. After all, it's your head talking, not your bum. But we can fix that." Bum catcher's eyes widened. "Surely you don't mean... No, you can't be serious." Zach's bum nodded. "That's exactly what I mean. But don't be scared. Think of it as an honor. You will be the first of the new order, the first to be rearranged. What do you say?" Without waiting for an answer, Zach's bum motioned to the bum guards. They swing into action. One of them produced a pair of scissors and cut a hole in the back of the bum man's trousers and removed his bum. It came out coughing. It was very white and, judging by the way it was shivering, very frightened. "It's okay, little fella," said Zach's bum, patting it. "You'll be alright." Meanwhile, the other bum guard grabbed a handful of the bum catcher's hair and began to pull it. The bum catcher yelled. "I can't do it," said the bum. "I need help." One of the other bum guards put its arms around the first bum and they started pulling. All of a sudden, the bum catcher's head came free. The bum guard stumbled backwards and fell over. "Well, don't just lie there," said Zach's bum, taking the head of the bum catcher from the bum guard. "Stand him up." The bum guards picked up the bum catcher up off the platform and helped him to his feet. He stood there, swaying groggily back and forth, while Zach's bum attached the bum catcher's head to where his bum had been. The crowd cheered, but that cheer was nothing compared to when Zach's bum, lifted up by the two bum guards, crowned the bum catcher's neck with his bum. "All hail the new order," yelled Zach's bum. "All hail the new order," chanted the crowd. It was a truly grotesque sight. The bum catcher swayed from side to side, as if his bum wasn't sure how to control its new body. "Help!" yelled the bum catcher's head. "I can't breathe." "Now you know how we feel," said Zach's bum. "Guards, put his underpants back on." The bums pulled the bum catcher's underpants up over his face, muffling any further protests. After this, Zach's bum turned back to the crowd. "This is just the beginning," it yelled. "Follow me now, to the bumcano, to our glorious future." Zach's bum leapt off the platform and the crowd surfed its way to the main exit. "To the bumcano," it crowded as it passed through the gate. "To the bumcano," echoed the vast crowd of bums as they followed into the night. And a quick drink here. Zach waited until all the bums had left the oval. He was terrified. Didn't want what had happened to the bum catcher to happen to him. He probably would have waited longer, except the bum catcher's body, still swaying on the platform, looked uncertain. I took a few uncertain steps and fell. Zach heard the bum catcher groan. He jumped up out of the hot dog stand and ran to him. The bum catcher's bum was scared. "I don't want this," it whimpered. "I know," said Zach. "I saw the whole thing." Zach pulled the bum catcher's underpants down so that he could see the bum catcher's face. He looked terrible. His face was bright red, his eyes popping out of their sockets, and his breath was shocking. To make it worse, he poked his tongue out and made a loud slobbery raspberry sound. He was clearly delirious. Whether it was from the rearrangement or or the fall was hard to say. Zach knew he had to bring him to his senses. Zach took a can of pine-scented air freshener that was hanging off the bum catcher's belt and sprayed it near his face to try and neutralize the effects of the rearrangement. As the smell of pine trees filled the air, the bum catcher's eyeballs stopped rolling and focused. "Zach?" he said, with fresh terror in his eyes. "What are you doing here? You're not on their side, are you?" "No way," said Zach. "I was following my bum. It sneaked out of my bedroom." The bum catcher groaned. "That was your bum up there, wasn't it?" he said. "Yes," Zach said, feeling ashamed. "I thought I recognized it," said the bum catcher. "I never forget a bum." "You look bad," said Zach, quickly changing the subject. "Do you think you'll be able to catch them?" The bum catcher shook his head. "I'm going to be out of action for a while," he said. "At least until I can get myself sorted out. I can't stop those bums now." "But if you can't, then who will?" said Zach. Bum catcher winced as he spoke. "Listen to me, Zach," he said. "Your bum's gone psycho. There's only one person who can stop it. Silas Stern." "Silas Stern?" said Zach. The bum catcher nodded. He knew about Silas Stern. Everybody did. Like all his friends at school, Zach collected bum fighter trading cards, and the card featuring Silas was the rarest and the most prized of all. He was one of the world's greatest bum hunters. He had hunted and captured some of the biggest, meanest bums on the planet. His photograph on the card showed a fierce-looking man dressed in a shiny black ninja suit. Unlike a ninja, however, he was wearing a white hard hat with a miner's lamp on the front of it. Also unlike a ninja, he had a couple of massive bum guns slung across his shoulders. Zach had to trade 10 of his best bum fighter cards for it, including cards featuring the Smacker, the Kicker, the Kisser, but he was so happy to get the Silas card, he didn't even mind. The bum catcher groaned. His eyes were closed. He was obviously in pain. Zach sprayed a little more air freshener above his head. The bum catcher opened his eyes and focused on him with difficulty. "Zach, you have to go to the bum hunter. Tell him everything that's happened here tonight. He'll know what to do." "But I can't go out there," said Zach. "It's too dangerous. The whole town will be crawling with bums." "Zach," said the bum catcher, "it's your bum. It's your responsibility. You can't stick your head in the sand or it'll end up grafted to your backside, just like mine." He was right. Zach knew that. But he was still scared. Despite his enthusiasm for collecting bum fighter trading cards, he had no desire to be a bum fighter himself. Well, perhaps it wasn't so much a lack of desire as a lack of aptitude. Zach had failed the Junior Bum Fighters League entry exam 3 times. Each time he'd been gassed by a particularly clumsy and slow-moving bum, much to the amusement of the other junior bum fighters, and to the embarrassment of his parents and himself. After the 3rd gassing, he had given up thoughts of fighting bums and devoted himself to his trading card collection instead. The bum catcher, sensing Zach's fear, spoke to him gently. "Look, Zach," he said, "I'm not asking you to fight them. All you have to do is contact the bum hunter. Here, I've got everything you need. My utility belt. Take it. The bum catcher undid the belt from around his waist and handed it to Zach. Zach took the belt. It was made of thick brown leather and had a huge large buckle with the words "Be bold, be brave, be free" inscribed on the front. The belt had a variety of little holsters and hooks to which the basic tools of bum catching were attached. There were 3 little wooden clothes pegs, a roll of toilet paper, a fluffy pink toilet seat cover, a small rolled up net, a row of corks, a set of sewing needles, a box of matches, a tennis racket, and a cake of soap. I understood what most of these items were for, except the soap. "What's the soap for?" he asked. "For washing your hands," said the bum catcher. "It's the first rule of bum fighting. Always wash your hands after that. Got it?" Zach nodded. The bum catcher lay back down, grimacing with pain. "One more thing, Zach," he murmured weakly. "What's that?" said Zach, his mind reeling. "Put those socks on." The bum catcher handed him a pair of thick brown bum catcher socks. "Socks?" said Zach, wondering if the bum catcher had gone mad. "Yes," said the bum catcher. "Put them on now, and don't take them off until you need them." "How would I know when I need them?" said Zach, still confused. "You'll know," he said. "You'll just know." Where will I find the bum hunter?" asked Zach. The bum catcher didn't respond. He had lost consciousness. Zach slapped his cheek. "Wake up," he said. "You haven't told me where I can find the bum hunter." For a moment, there was no response. Then the bum catcher half opened his eyes. He tried to form words. "I need more spray," he whispered. Zach sprayed. The bum catcher started talking, although still with difficulty. "You will find him at the..." His voice trailed off. Zach pressed the nozzle on the spray can, but nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. Zach threw the can on the ground. "Where?" he pleaded. "Just tell me where." But it was no use. The bum catcher was completely out of it. Zach looked at the belt on his hand and read the inscription on the buckle again. "Be bold, be brave, be free." Zach didn't feel bold. He didn't feel brave, and he certainly didn't feel free. He wasn't free to live his life. His bum was wrecking everything. Whatever he tried to do, his bum would always find a way to sabotage it. Zach knew the bum catcher was right. His bum was his responsibility. He had to find the bum hunter before it got any more out of control. Zach put the belt on. It hung loosely around his waist. He pulled it tight, but it still felt weird. It reminded him of the feeling he had when he had put on the cowboy suit his parents gave him for his 6th birthday. It was too big, and the seams itched his skin. To make things worse, he had pricked himself on the shiny sheriff's badge and cried. He'd begged to be able to take this off, much to his father's frustration. "But you only just put it on," he said. Give it time," his mother said. "He probably just needs to grow into it." But Zach had never worn it again. He just didn't like it. He didn't like the belt, and as far as Zach was concerned, the only difference between his cowboy suit and the bum catcher's belt was instead of guns, he had a roll of toilet paper on one hip and a tennis racket on the other. Just as Zach was about to leave, he remembered the socks. "Oh, great," he mumbled as he rolled them onto his feet. Excuse me. "Not only do I have to find the bum hunter, I get my crazy..." Hold on one second. "Oh, great," he mumbled as he rolled them onto his feet. "Not only do I have to find the bum hunter, get my crazy bum back and save the world, I have to wear bum catcher socks that will make my feet hot and stinky. This day just keeps getting better and better." He pulled his shoes back on and headed towards the gate. End of chapter 1. I don't know what's going on with the frame drops, friends, so I do apologize. Nothing's changed from yesterday, and everything ran fine yesterday, so I don't know what the problem is. Chapter 2. The Bum Hunter's Daughter. Zach couldn't see a single bum anywhere as he left the oval, but he could see where they'd been. There were skid marks everywhere. Splintered, broken, smoking trees, smashed house windows, the roads, pockmarked with more craters and blast holes than the surface of the moon. Cars laying on their sides were completely overturned, obviously shaken by some powerful blasts. And everywhere, permeating everything, the air was warm and thick with the stench of rotten egg gas. Breathing was almost impossible. Zach reached down to the belt, took out one of the clothes pegs and put it on his nose. It provided instant relief. He was glad the bum catcher insisted he take the belt. As he crossed a large intersection on the outskirts of town, he noticed a droning noise. Zach couldn't identify it, but it was getting louder. It seemed to be coming from overhead. He looked up. The sky streaked with light. Dawn wasn't far away, and then he saw them. Flying bums. A whole squadron, heading straight towards him. The noise was deafening and the smell was so intense that Zach almost passed out. He ran down the hill to hide under some trees behind the small creek, but it was too late. They had seen him. As Zach ran, he looked over his shoulder. A bum broke away from the pack and began to zoom towards him. It was not a pretty sight. It was large and coming in fast. Zach fell to the ground and put his hands over his head, just in time. The bum swooped down over him, brushing the back of his hands. Zach lifted his head to see the bum shoot up in the sky, turn and start hurtling back towards him, even faster this time. Zach gulped. This was just like the exam he'd failed last time he'd tried for the Junior Bum Fighters League, except worse. The bum that had gassed him there was slow-moving and clumsy. This bum was bigger, meaner, and meant business. Real business. Zach became aware of a sharp pain in his side. It was the tennis racket handle. He pushed himself up with one elbow, reached down, and pulled the racket off the belt. As if he was going to die, at least Zach wanted to die in comfort. Then Zach noticed something strange. As he produced the tennis racket from underneath him, the color drained from the bum, leaving it deathly white. Instinctively, Zach realized that the bum was scared. It was scared of the racket. Zach grabbed the handle tightly, and a daring idea formed in his mind. He could hit it. It was worth a try. After all, what did he have to lose? He figured out he was going to die anyway. Zach rolled over, sat up, hid the racket behind his back, and waited until the bum was almost on top of him, and then he let it fly. Whack! The bum went hurtling off its racket and into the back of a parked car. The explosion was deafening, and the force of it knocked Zach over onto his back. Zach couldn't believe what he'd just done. He stood up to run, but two more bums, even larger than the first, broke away from the main group and sped towards him. Zach raised his tennis racket ready to hit them. As they drew closer, however, one veered around to attack him from behind, while the other continued its assault from the front. Zach gulped and gulped again, one gulp for each bum. Those bums were smart, he thought. They knew he could only hit one at a time. But then Zach had another daring idea. He focused his eyes on the bum coming towards him. He could hear the evil drone of the other bum coming from behind. At the last moment possible, he ducked, and the bums collided with the thunderous sonic boom. Zach was thrown face first onto the ground. But that wasn't the end of his problems, because now the rest of the squadron was heading towards him, and they were not happy. Zach knew his tennis racket would be no use against so many bums. There must have been 50 of them spread out across the sky, heading towards him from every direction. He didn't know a lot about bum fighting. He knew enough what this meant. It was a cluster bomb. Zack started running. He had to find cover or he was going to be obliterated. And then Zack saw it, an open storm drain. He ran towards it, made it to the mouth of the enormous pipe when the bums collided. Wham! He felt the heat on his back as the blast propelled him into the darkness of the drain. Zack rocketed through the pipe and shot out the large open area on which a number of other empty... Oh, holy mackerel. Why is... The first sentence is like the worst. Zack rocketed through the pipe and shot out into a large open area in which a number of other drains empty. He crashed into a small card table surrounded by bums. The table collapsed underneath him and the bums went flying. Before Zack could get up, the bums were all around him, poking him with their soft frog-like fingers. Well, 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 said a well-scrubbed bum who was wearing a cardboard party hat on the shape of a crown. If it isn't a bum catcher, how nice of him to drop by, isn't it, Maurice? Maurice, a larger bum beside him, nodded. Very nice, Prince, he said in a deep... Let me try that again. Very nice, Prince, he said in a deep voice. Very nice indeed. The rest of the bums elbowed each other and sniggered. The bum called Prince jumped onto Zack's chest. Well, he said, to what do we owe this unexpected pleasure, bum catcher? The smell of the prince's breath almost knocked Zack out, despite the clothes peg on his nose. I'm not a bum catcher, said Zack. Do you take me for a fool? Said the prince. No, said Zack. Then why do you assault me? Said the prince. Insult you, said Zack. What do you mean? Well, you're wearing a bum catcher's utility belt, said the prince, reaching for the unclipped belt dangling it in front of Zack's face. I assume you're not delivering pizzas. The other bums slapped their thighs and winked at each other in appreciation of their leader's joke. That's not my belt, said Zack. Look, said the prince. I'd like to believe you. I really would, wouldn't I, Maurice? That's right, said Maurice. He would. He really would. He really and truly... That'll do, Maurice, said the prince. Sorry, sir, said Maurice. As I was saying, said the prince, I'd like to believe you, but it's more than my job's worth, you see? As the leader of bum intelligence, it's my job to capture and interrogate any humans engaged in anti-bum activities. Now, put yourself in my shoes. A human wearing a bum catcher's utility belt enters the room and tells us he's not a bum catcher. What would you do? Let him go? Suggested Zack. No, said Prince. I'd hoped you might be a little more clever than that. I would interrogate him, find out who he's working for, and how many more of them there are. I'd probably even have to torture him, unless he wanted to save time and tell me the truth straight up. As Prince spoke, a gang of bums closed in even more tightly around Zack. I'm telling you, said Zack, I'm not a bum catcher, and I don't work for anyone. But Prince just ignored him. Maurice, he said. Maurice stepped forward, snapping his feet to attention. Yes, sir. Match, please, said the prince. Yes, sir. As Maurice said Maurice, producing a box of matches. He opened the box and passed a match to Prince. You know what this is? Said the prince, waving it in front of Zack's face. The gang of bums all took a few steps back. Yes, said Zack, beginning to tremble. A match? Good, said the prince. At least we're getting somewhere. Now tell me, who are you working for? Nobody. Let me try that again. Nobody, said Zack. You're making a mistake. I'm not working for anyone. I'm a civilian. The prince nodded. For a moment, Zack thought it was because he understood. But then the prince gestured to Maurice to come closer. Maurice stepped forward with the matchbox held out in his hand. I was hoping to avoid this, said the prince in a low voice. But unless you answer my questions truthfully, leave me no choice. I'm telling you the truth, said Zack, feeling the sweat form on the back of his neck. The prince was clearly psycho, he thought, perhaps even more psycho than his own bum. The prince sighed and struck the match against the box. It flared. The bums leaned forward as close as they dared, not wanting to miss a single moment of the action. Zack knew what was coming. Bums and matches were a bad combination. He tried to get away, but Maurice put his foot on his chest. Zack was trapped. Maurice took a deep breath, brought the match in front of his mouth, and held out his finger. Maurice, pull my finger. Zack closed his eyes. Suddenly, he heard a splash. Stop right there, said a voice. Move away from him and face the wall. That goes for all of you. Zack stood up. There, standing at the end of the drain he slid through, was a girl wearing army camouflage pants and a green singlet. Her hair was a tangled mess. She looked like she'd been living rough. She was heavily armed, a bum gun on each hip, a knife strapped to one of her black combat boots, and a huge bomb blaster hanging off her shoulder. She was holding onto it with both hands, standing absolutely still, with the air of somebody who expected to be obeyed. She was scowling, looking directly at the prince, who hadn't moved. Well, what are you waiting for? She said, jumping down from the lip of the pipe and landing cat-like on the metal grate without losing either her balance or pose. The bums scuttled to the edge of the drain, all except Prince and Maurice. Dear me, said the prince, such rudeness. Have you ever heard of the like, Maurice? No, sir, said Maurice gravely. Don't believe I have. You, my dear, said the prince, turning to the girl, need to learn some manners. And all you need to do is move to that wall, she said, taking a menacing step towards him, or I'll shoot. I'll do as you ask, said Prince, but first you must say please. The only response from the girl was a volley of gunfire. Throwing pins shot out of her gun and embedded themselves in a straight line along the tabletop, stopping only a few centimeters from Zack's leg. Maurice screamed. I used drawing pins that time, said the girl. Next time it'll be staples. Okay, all right, said the prince. Temper, temper. Zack reached up and snatched the utility belt from the prince's hand. The prince glanced at the girl, slightly worried. We weren't gonna hurt him, he said, looking back at Zack. Honestly, we're having a little bit of fun, weren't we, Maurice? Suddenly, the air was full of staples. The girl sprayed the metal grate in front of the prince and Maurice. They shielded themselves as best as they could with their little froggy arms, but many staples rebounded and stuck to them. They responded by jumping around as if they were standing on a hot plate. Hey, said the prince, that hurts. Just shut up and move, said the girl. I won't tell you again. Next time, it'll be nails, rusty ones. Something about her tone, combined with the threat of rusty nails, was serious enough to get through to Prince and Maurice. They ran and joined the other bums on the far side of the drain. The girl walked towards Zack, staring angrily into his eyes. Zack was sweating. She was almost more frightening than the bums. Are you hurt? Said the girl. No, said Zack. You came just in time. I heard the cluster bum, she said. I figured they must have been after somebody. What the hell are you doing out after the bum siren had sounded anyway? Bum siren? Said Zack. I didn't hear a bum siren. Well, you must be deaf as well as dumb, she said. What? Zack was beginning to think Prince was right. This girl was rude. Anyone who walks out in the streets in the middle of a bum curfew, unarmed, is asking for trouble, she said, and I have to waste my time saving them. I wasn't unarmed, said Zack, showing her the utility belt. I was wearing this. That's a cute little toy, the girl said, smiling. Did you get it for Christmas? No, said Zach. A bum catcher gave it to me. The girl sighed. Bloody street cleaners, she said. They should leave it to the professionals. He is a professional, said Zach. If God had meant us to catch bums, she said, patting her bum blaster, she wouldn't have given us these to kill them with. So you're a bum fighter, she said. What's your name? Said Zach. Eleanor. I'm Zach, he said, holding out his hand. She ignored it. Let's get out of here, she says. It stinks. She waved her gun towards the pipe she had jumped out of. Can you get up there? I think so, said Zach. Let's go then, she said. She turned, ran towards the wall, and one graceful move jumped up and landed back upon the ledge of the drain. Zach went back as far as he could and began to run. He jumped, reached up to the lip of the drain, and missed. He put his hands up on the ledge and tried to pull himself up. He got his head and shoulders onto the pipe, but it was hard enough to get a good grip and on the slippery concrete. Eleanor knelt down and grabbed Zach's pajamas top. With one mighty heave, she swung him up over the drain and into the pipe. She did it with such force that Zach went sliding through the pipe, through the darkness, and shot out the other end where he originally come in. Eleanor was right behind him. Come on, she said as they emerged, blinking into the light. My bummobile is hidden in the park not far from here. You got a bummobile? Said Zach. What sort? A 370 TZ. With retractable wings, he said. Of course, she said. Handles all terrain. Even goes underwater. Wow, said Zach as he looked at the girl. She couldn't have been much older than him, and yet she'd already had her own bummobile. The girl took one of her bum guns from her holster and handed it to him. Here, she said. You better take this. Zach looked at the gun and felt his pulse quickening. It was a 2502 LL. The LL stood for laxative launcher. State of the art. It could fire up to 5 capsules per laxative second. 5 capsules of pure laxative per second. Are you sure? He said. Of course I'm sure, she said. What's the matter? Are you scared? No, Zach said quickly. Up until now, he had only read about guns like this. He had never dreamed of he'd actually get to hold one. He held up the gun to his eye, put his finger on the trigger and took aim through the telescopic viewfinder. Suddenly, the gun jolted backwards in his hand and a volley of capsules poured out of the neck. You idiot, said Eleanor. Are you trying to get us killed? I'm sorry, he said. It was an accident. You'll have to be more careful than that if you want to stay alive, she said. Let's go. Keep your head down. I can't see any bums, but that doesn't mean they're not around. Zach nodded, his face burning with embarrassment. He knew he was no bum fighter, but it was too late to back out now. Crouching low, Zach followed the girl through the long grass by the side of the creek. Soon, they reached the edge of a large park. Eleanor pointed to a weeping willow on the other side. Its thick branches drooped all the way to the ground. That's where my bummobile is hidden, she said. Let's go. Zach nodded. They were about halfway across the park when they heard a weird high-pitched squealing noise above them. What's that? Said Zach. Get down, said Eleanor, pushing him roughly to the ground. A bum whizzed over their heads and splashed on the ground a few meters in front of them. Kamikaze bums, said Eleanor, pointing to a large dead tree behind them, its branches lined with hundreds of bums wearing a red band. We're gonna have to make a run for it. She sprinted off across the park towards the bummobile. Zach ran after her. The bums whizzed and whined overhead, exploding all around them. Finally, they made it to the willow tree. Eleanor parted the curtain of branches to reveal the bummobile. Zach's eyes bulged. The 370 TZ was an amazing machine. It resembled an armored tank, except it was as if the top half had been removed and were replaced with 2 large perspex domes. Also unlike a tank, it had a long yellow nose at the front of it and tapered to a very sharp point. The letters BH007 were written along the side in red. But the thing that really caught Zach's eyes were the number of rocket thrusters mounted on the rear. This would make the Bummobile capable of flying at least twice the speed of wind, easily enough to hunt down, or, if necessary, escape the biggest and meanest bums. Zack was so amazed by the sight of the Bummobile, he completely forgotten about the bum gun in his hand. Suddenly, another volley of capsules sprayed out of the neck and into the trunk of the tree. For a moment, nothing happened, and then Zack saw the most incredible thing he had ever seen. Every single leaf fell off the tree, leaving it just a skeleton of branches, and the Bummobile completely exposed. Zack blinked and shook his head. They were powerful laxatives, that's for sure. "You idiot!" yelled Eleanor. "Now look what you've done!" "It was an accident," said Zack, but he was drowned out by the sound of bums smashing into the side of the Bummobile and exploding. "Cover me," said Eleanor, leaping on top of the Bummobile. She knelt down and grabbed hold of the entry hatch and pulled it open, but a bum was heading straight for her. Zack heard it, spun around, took aim, and fired. It was a direct hit. The bum released a volcanic geyser of brown liquid and blew apart completely, covering both Zack and Eleanor with something very similar in consistency to chocolate mousse, except much, much stinkier. "I did it," said Zack to Eleanor, jumping down. "I did it." "That's great," said Eleanor, lowering herself into the hatch. "But what are you going to do about that?" She pointed behind Zack and then disappeared into the Bummobile. Zack looked around, and what he saw made his stomach stop. An enormous boulder was running down the hill towards him, but it wasn't any ordinary boulder. It was a bum boulder. Hundreds of bums clustered together, hurtling across the grass, crushing saplings like matchsticks. Zack stared at it. The bum boulder was less than 50 meters away. "Well, don't just stand there, you idiot," yelled Eleanor, poking her head back up through the hatch. "Jump in!" Zack took one last look at the boulder, turned, and with an almost superhuman effort, jumped straight into the Bummobile, pulling the hatch shut behind him. Eleanor was in the front dome of the Bummobile, strapping herself in to one of the pilot seats. "Hold on," she yelled. "Firing the bum thrusters!" Before Zack had a chance to grab hold of anything, the Bummobile roared into life. Suddenly, he was staggering backwards as they shot up into the sky. Zack hit the back wall of the Bummobile and fell sideways, his face pressed up against the Perspex dome. He saw the bum boulder smash into the willow tree and burst apart, sending bums flying into the air. They quickly regrouped and began chasing the Bummobile. "They're after us!" Zack yelled. The Bummobile suddenly dived. This time Zack went flying forward and fell heavily onto the controls in the front dome, landing with his face pressed hard against the windshield. "You idiot!" screamed Eleanor. "Why aren't you strapped in?" "I didn't have the time," said Zack, but Eleanor wasn't listening. She was too busy concentrating on the huge mass of bums speeding towards them. There must have been 500 of them, a big, angry wasp-like cloud of bums. "Oh no," she said. "Hold on, we're going to have to corkscrew." "What does that mean?" said Zack. Eleanor pulled down her steering wheel. The Bummobile started looping in a series of smaller and smaller circles. Zack began to feel sick already, but this was the last straw. He threw up, in a corkscrew pattern, all over the controls, the windscreen, and the floor. Eleanor was frantically trying to wipe clean a space on the windshield so she could see through, when Zack slipped and fell on top of her. Eleanor's head hit the last side of the Bummobile, and with a thump, and she slumped in her chair, completely knocked out. With nobody at the controls, the Bummobile flipped upside down, and Zack fell backwards, landing against... Let me start that sentence again. With nobody at the controls, the Bummobile flipped upside down, and Zack fell backwards and landed against the hatch with such force it sprung open. As Zack fell, he grabbed the edge of the hatch and held on for his life. Zack's heart was pounding as he took stock of his predicament. He was hanging from an upside-down, out-of-control Bummobile with a posse of angry bums hot on his tail. Within moments, they were at his feet, and at the head of the pack were two bums that he recognized oh too well. "Greetings, my dear boy," said the first bum. "What a great pleasure it is to see you again. Don't you agree, Maurice?" "Oh yes, your highness," said Maurice, smiling. "It is indeed a great, great pleasure." End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. The B-Team. Although Prince and Maurice might have been glad to see Zack, he certainly wasn't glad to see them. As the prince buzzed around him, Zack tried to kick his ugly little face, but he was too fast. All Zack succeeded in doing was kicking off the prince's paper crown. "Dear me," the prince said to Maurice. "That's not a very nice greasing, after all we've done for him." "Perhaps we should teach him some manners, sir," said Maurice. "An excellent idea," said the prince. "After you, my dear Maurice." "That's very kind of you," said Maurice. "Very kind indeed. Very, very—" "Maurice!" said the prince. Maurice sped up and launched himself into Zack's stomach. Zack gasped, completely winded. It felt to him like he had just caught a medicine ball full in the gut. And before he could catch his breath, Prince did the same and winded him again. As they repositioned themselves for another attack, Zack put one arm in front of his stomach to protect himself. Maurice's next attack came not to Zack's stomach, however, but onto his right hand, where he was holding onto the latch. Maurice came in hard and fast, over and over again, while Prince continued to pound Zack's stomach, and the bummobile plummeted ever faster towards the ground. Zack tried to endure the pain, but he knew it wouldn't be long before his bruised fingers couldn't take any more. And then he saw them. 3 of the bravest and best bum fighters in the world were speeding up from the ground towards them. The B-Team. Zack couldn't believe his luck. He had to blink a few times just to make sure he wasn't dreaming. But it was them, alright. They were an amazing sight. Zack smiled. They were just like their pictures on the trading cards, and even though they were among the trading cards he had swapped for the Bum Hunters card, he was still very, very pleased to see them. Leading the charge was Kicker, a large, muscular man wearing a sleeveless black and white footy jumper and footy shorts. He had a big, black, bushy beard, thick black eyebrows, and the most enormous feet Zack had ever seen. Right behind him was an equally huge woman, who was wearing an orange floral dress. She wore her hair in 2 enormous buns, one either side of her head, and she had hands like baseball mittens. It wasn't hard to see why she was called the Smacker. Bringing up the rear was a man dressed in a white 3-piece suit. He had a white scarf around his neck and a red carnation in his left lapel. Apart from looking completely out of place riding on a bum, the other striking feature was his lips. They were big and red and wet looking. He was simply known as the Kisser, and was famous for his legendary kiss of death. The 3 riders whooshed up into the middle of the pack of bums, sending them flying in all directions. The Kisser grabbed Zack around the waist and shot through the hatch with him. He brought a flying bum into a screeching halt, dismounted, and ran up to the front of the dome where Eleanor was hanging upside down in her seat, still unconscious. The Kisser climbed into the seat behind her, strapped himself in, and turned the bummobile 180 degrees. As he did so, Zack fell off the flying bum and crashed onto the floor, right on top of the Kicker and Smacker. "Get off my head!" growled the Kicker. "I'm sorry," said Zack. "It was an accident." "Accident my bum," said the Kicker, picking himself up. "I'm gonna give your bum a kicking it'll never forget. I'll teach you to be a bum sympathizer." Zack backed away from him. This strange, violent man was freaking him out. Now, said the Smacker, stepping in between the Kicker and Zack. "No one's going to kick anyone's bum until we know the facts." "Kick first, ask questions later," said the Kicker. "That's my motto." Right at that moment, a huge bum crashed into the roof. Another bum crashed into the floor. There was silence for a moment, and then I heard a volley of bum fire from the rear. No, Kicker, said the smacker, who quickly pulled the hatch shut. There's no time for that now. We got a bum blitz on our hands. They're coming at us from all directions. Can this thing go any faster? Bellowed Kicker. We got the gas on full already, said the kisser. Zach glanced towards the front of the bummobile and immediately wished he hadn't. A big hairy bum attached itself to the windshield. Zach couldn't recall when he'd seen anything so horrible. It's made him feel like throwing up all over again. The kicker shook his head in disgust. Leave it to me, he said. No, said the smacker. Too dangerous. Not as dangerous as flying with a big hairy bum on the windshield, he said. He wrenched the hatch open, pulled himself up through it, and dropped it shut. The bum blot stopped instantly, and Zach and the others watched Kicker clomp along the roof to the front of the bummobile until the view of him was absorbed by the hairy bum. Suddenly, the windshield was clear. The hairy bum obviously booted into oblivion by the kicker, who was standing on the nose of the bummobile, grinning widely, and giving them the thumbs up. Zach could see the other bums were keeping a safe distance, just out of kicking range. The kicker turned towards them, beckoned them, daring them to come closer. One did. The kicker booted it so hard it split in two. Another bum flew from the left-hand side. But the kicker didn't even blink. He lashed out with a perfect side kick and sent the bum spinning. The rest of the bums charged in fast after that, as if all keen to avenge the other bums. But if the kicker was worried, he sure didn't show it. He was drop-kicking, torpedo punting, and pirouetting. He looked amazing. The bums were flying everywhere. Look at him go, said the smacker. That's poetry, that is. Zach wondered what kind of poetry described a brute in a footy jumper kicking bums senseless. Certainly not any poetry they're giving him to read in school. As Zach watched, he noticed that the kisser didn't seem quite so enthusiastic about the kicker's performance as the smacker. He seemed to wince every time the kicker's boot connected with the bum. Meanwhile, one of the bums was orbiting the kicker's head at high speed. The kicker was swatting it with both hands, as if it was a particularly annoying mosquito, but the bum persisted. Swatting clearly hadn't been Kicker's main strength. All of a sudden, the bum found an opening it was looking for and attached itself to the kicker's face. Oh no, said the smacker. Looks like he's in trouble. Kicker grabbed the bum by its cheeks and tried to pull it off, but it was too tightly attached. Meanwhile, the rest of the bums were coming in thick and fast. I've got to get out there, said the smacker, raising from her seat. She pulled herself through the hatch. Zach watched her stomp along the roof into the nose of the bummobile. Then the action really started. He thought the kicker was pretty spectacular, but the smacker was something else again. She rolled up her dress sleeves past her elbows, raised her enormous hands in the air, and put on the most amazing display of slapping and smacking Zach had ever seen. Backhanders, front-handers, slap, super double front and backhander power slaps. There wasn't a smack or a slap that she did not know. She smacked one bum so hard it simply blew apart, smearing the windshield with a brown liquid. Damn, muttered the kisser, fumbling for the windscreen flusher. He got to excuse me. When he got the window clean, there was just the smacker and kicker out on the nose alone. The kicker still had the bum attached to his face though, and the smacker was holding him by the shoulder and smacking the bum with a front slap on one cheek and a backhander on the other. After almost a minute of this punishment, the bum fell off the kicker's face. The kicker looked dazed and confused. He staggered backwards, and Zach was sure that he was going to snap off the nose of the bummobile until Smacker grabbed him. She threw him over her shoulders in a firefighter's lift and walked back up the windshield and across the roof. Zach opened the hatch, and the Smacker lowered the kicker, still dazed, down into the bummobile. Hello, Nuke. How are you doing today, friend? Kicker was in a bad way. His knees buckled and he sank to the floor. The smacker lowered herself down next to him and closed the hatch behind her. I love the smell of freshly smacked bum in the morning, she said. She went across to a small sink mounted on the wall of the bummobile and began to wash her hands. Call that smacking? said Eleanor, pulling herself up out of her seat. Eleanor, said the smacker, wiping her hands on the front of her dress. You're awake. The smacker walked across to Eleanor and threw her enormous arms around her. Good to see you, said Eleanor as she emerged from the mighty hug. But why? How did you get here? We saw your bummobile flying upside down. We caught this guy hanging from the hatch, said the smacker, pointing at Zack. We got here just in time. Eleanor glared at Zack. You idiot, she said. You could have killed us both. It was an accident, said Zack. You should have had your seatbelt on, said Eleanor. I didn't get a chance, said Zack. You went to that corkscrew thing, and I got a really weak stomach. Don't remind me, said Eleanor, screwing up her face. Aren't you going to introduce us to your boyfriend? The smacker said, grinning. His name is Zack, said Eleanor, and he's not my boyfriend. I found him wandering the streets in the middle of bum curfew. It saved his life. The biggest mistake I've ever made. Thanks a lot, said Zack. The kicker groaned. Is he alright? Said Eleanor. He'll be fine, said the smacker. Oh, he said, touching his nose. What happened? How did I get back in here? You got one on the face, said Smacker. How many times do I have to tell you? Keep your head protected. Honestly, for an experienced bum fighter, you can be a real klutz. I was doing alright, said the kicker. And you almost got yourself killed, said the smacker, or at least rearranged. Zack felt a shiver run down his spine as he remembered what had happened to the bum catcher earlier at the rally. Excuse me, he said. Did you say rearranged? Yeah, said the smacker, eyeing him suspiciously. What of it? Zack hesitated. Last night, he said, I saw it. I saw someone get rearranged. It was horrible. You saw a rearrangement? Said Eleanor, flashing an alarmed look at the smacker. Zack took a deep breath and told them the whole story. When he'd finished, Eleanor slammed her fist in the palm of her hand. I knew they were up to something, she said. I had no idea it was this big. You really think they're capable of that? Said Zack. You better believe it, said the smacker. For the last 30 years we've travelled around the world, nipping uprisings in the bud, wherever they appear. Most bum revolutions amount to little more than hot air, but it sounds like this is the most organised. And Eleanor, said Zack, are you part of the B team too? Not exactly, she said, but my father used to be, before he became a full-time bum hunter. Your father's a bum hunter? Said Zack. Yes, she said. His name is Silas. Zack gasped. He couldn't believe it. This was incredibly good luck. Silas was the person who could stop his bum and save the world, and he was Eleanor's father. Where is he? Said Zack. Can you take me to him? We need to let him know what's happening. Eleanor shook her head. I don't know where he is, she said. All I know is I came home last week and there was a note. He was gone. No note, nothing. It's not like him at all. Zack gasped. He couldn't believe it. It was incredibly bad luck. The one person that could stop his bum and save the world was missing. Do you have any idea where he went? Said the smacker. Hunting the great white bum, said Eleanor. Where else? The very mention of the great white bum sent new shivers down Zack's spine. The great white bum was in the class of its own, a rogue bum, enormous, evil. There were many different theories about where it had come from. Some believed it to be a mutant bum, created as the first accidental side effect of nuclear testing in the Pacific. Some believed it had been around for centuries. One Egyptian scholar had claimed to have discovered hieroglyphics depicting a large white bum. In his books Chariots of the Bums, Eric von Daniken even went so far as to claim the great white bum was a space traveler who had arrived on Earth and taught ancient bums about bum liberation. Some believed it had been around even longer than that. A sort of throwback to the age of dinosaurs that had somehow avoided extinction. Perhaps the first bum to ever grow legs and walk on the surface of the Earth. So what are we gonna do? Said Zach. We've got to find that bumcano, and plug it as soon as possible, said the smacker. Let them stew in their own juices. Give them a taste of their own medicine, roared Kicker, who had red cheeks now, instead of the deathly white moments before. Eleanor nodded. I agree, she said. Count me in, said the kisser. Me too, said Zach. Said Eleanor. Not you, Zach. We're dropping you off at the nearest bum shelter. This job is for professionals. What about my bum? Said Zach. What about it? She said. It's my bum, said Zach. I want it back. I know it's a bit out of control right now, but I'm kind of attached to it. Not anymore, you're not, said Eleanor. What you need is a prosthetic bum. A what? Said Zach, but Eleanor didn't answer him. Instead, she turned around and flung open the lid of one of the padded bench seats that ran along the side of the bummobile. She rummaged around the compartment underneath the seat and pulled out a bum. A clear, wobbly silicone bum. She threw it at Zach. Here, she said, try this. It's a bit big, but it'll do until you get one properly fitted. But I don't want a false bum, said Zach, throwing it down on the floor of the bummobile. I want my real bum. Don't be an idiot, said Eleanor. Real bums are nothing but trouble. Sooner or later, you're going to need to go to the toilet, and I guarantee you, you're not going to care what sort of bum you got. She's right, you know, said the smacker, picking up the bum and gently putting it back in Zach's hands. We've all got falsies. They're the safest and best. Take the bum. You'll need it. I still think I should come with you, said Zach. No, Zach, said the smacker. Eleanor's right about that too. A bumcano is no place for a civilian. For anyone of that matter. The odds are against us, but we've all had years of experience fighting bums, and with a bit of luck we can tip the odds back in our favour. But not with you there, Zach, I'm sorry. Perhaps you're right, said Zach. He gripped the false bum, kneaded it back and forth in his hands. He knew what Eleanor and the smacker said made sense, but deep down he still felt responsible for all the trouble his bum had caused. It didn't feel right just to do nothing. Bum shelter ahead, announced the kisser. Beginning descent. Seatbelts on, everybody. The kicker, Eleanor, and Zach sat down and belted themselves in. The bummobile dived at a steep angle. Zach could feel his ears popping, and he could see through the front windscreen that they were heading towards an enormous stainless steel dome with the number 5 painted on top. A little way to the left of it was a landing pad. Zach sat back in his seat and prepared for touchdown. Kicker was bending over, pulling his laces tight. Any bums? Let me start that sentence again. Any bums try anything while we're down there? You'll know what I'll do, he said. Kick their bums, said Eleanor. Kicker goffed and slapped her knee. You got it, he said. Then, looking at Zach, his smile evaporating, he said, and if I see any more bum sympathizers, I'll kick their bums too. I'm not a bum oh my god, I'm tripping over my words now. I am not a bum sympathizer, said Zach, feeling scared again. The kicker could kick bums, that was for sure, but he wished the kicker would stop threatening to kick his. Bummobile BH-007 to Shelter 5, said the kisser into his headset. Permission to land, request over. The kisser waited and then repeated his request. That's odd, said the kisser. What's the matter? Said the smacker. I'm not getting any response, the kisser said. The radio's jammed, but there must be people inside the shelter. The brown flag is up. Land anyway, said the smacker. We'd better check it out. Roger, said the kisser. There was a hissing sound and the bummobile began to descend. The bummobile jolted to a stop. Uh-oh, said the smacker. It looks like we've got a welcoming committee. Zach looked out the window. The bummobile was surrounded by a mean-looking group of bums, armed with bum trumpets. No wonder we were having trouble getting through the radio, said Eleanor. They've been jamming the signal with high-frequency emissions. Leave them to me. Eleanor crossed the floor to a big black cabinet and opened it. Inside was the most amazing arsenal of bum hunting weaponry Zack had ever seen. There was every sort of bum fighting weapon imaginable. Bum guns, spear guns, harpoons, stun guns, and long pointy sticks. Some of them the most deadly of all bum fighting tools. There were bum magnets, bum shields, pink fluffy toilet seat covers, toilet brushes, soaps, and plastic holders, clothes pegs, rolls of sandpaper on ready-to-roll dispensers, and a huge range of deodorizers and disinfectants. Eleanor replaced her bum blaster on the rack and collected a smaller gun with a large round barrel, a Constipated 240. Zack recognized it as a clogger. He knew they were good at excuse me. He knew they were good at inhibiting enemy fire. Eleanor clipped it to her belt and pulled something down that looked like a leaf blower. That looks like a leaf blower, said Zack. That's because it is, said Eleanor. You can fight hundreds of bums at a time with a leaf blower. It's also good for cleaning up and clearing up the air afterwards. Eleanor slung the leaf blower across her shoulder and draped a rack of rubber bum plugs across her chest. Hold it, said the kisser. Let me handle this. Eleanor looked slightly disappointed. Are you sure? She said. Yeah, said the kisser. No point using up that ammunition if it's not strictly necessary. Besides, I could do with the exercise. Well, if you insist, said Eleanor. Oh, but I do, said the kisser. He stood up and applied some fresh lip gloss and brushed down his suit. Good luck, said Zack. Never fear, he said over his shoulder as he climbed out of the bummobile. The kisser's here. Zack locked up the hatch and sat back down in the cockpit as he watched the kisser approach the circle of bums. They saw him, turned. The kisser bowed very low, so low his head almost touched the ground. The bums moved in around him, but the kisser made no attempt to escape. Instead, he did something very strange. He began to dance. Zack watched with a mixture of confusion and amusement as the kisser gyrated his hips and swayed from side to side in front of the bums. But as the kisser danced, an even stranger thing happened. The bums, as if mesmerized, began to dance with him. They moved slowly from side to side, mimicking his movements with a sort of clumsy grace. Then, without stopping his dance, the kisser began motioning one of the larger bums to come to him. At first it seemed hesitant, but slowly, almost against its will, it crept forward until it was close enough for the kisser to touch. The kisser then reached out and tickled the bum under its arm. As the kisser tickled it, the bum seemed to undergo an amazing transformation. Its cheeks went bright red, it blushed and went weak to the knees. At this point, the kisser reached out and picked it up with both hands. It offered no resistance, brought it to his lips, and kissed it. The bum went limp, as if dead, or at least faint. The kisser then laid it on the ground next to him and began motioning another bum, which admitted itself to him easier than the first. Having charmed the bums, the kisser now disarming them as if they were no more dangerous than a pack of marauding marshmallows, not mushrooms. It didn't take long before he kissed and immobilized every last bum. They lay in a large pile beside him. Wow, said Zack. That's incredible. Better him than me, said the kicker. There's no way I'd want to kiss a bum. Not in a million years. Zack watched the kisser produce a silver hip glass from his jacket, tipped his head back, swilled the contents, and spat a mouthful of greenish liquid and dabbed the corners of his mouth with a white handkerchief. He took another swig and repeated the process. What's he doing? Said Zack. Gargling, said the smacker. I have to wash my hands after fighting bums, the kicker has to polish his boots, and the kisser has to wash his mouth with industrial grade disinfectant. Scrap fight, as we said, if you want to make it as a bum fighter, you have to keep it clean. It's a dirty business. Eleanor opened the hatch. And I'm now going to take a 1 minute and 30-second break. Because I've been talking constantly for an hour and a half. Okay. And welcome back. Eleanor opened the hatch. "Let's go," she said, climbing out of the bummobile. The kicker and smacker followed her. Zack was about to follow them when the radio crackled into life. "Bum Shelter 5 to bummobile BH007, said the voice. "Do you copy?" Zack picked up the handset and pushed the button. "Loud and clear," he said. The radio seemed to be working fine now that the bums were out of action and no longer able to jam their airways. "What's your position, bummobile BH007, said the voice. "We're on your landing pad," said Zack. The voice on the other end spluttered. You're what? You're in extreme danger. Repeat, extreme danger. Do not leave your craft under any circumstance. The whole area is surrounded. The bum shelter is infested with bums." "It's okay," said Zack. "The B team has them under control." "You're the B team?" said the voice. "The B team?" "Well," said Zack, "I'm not, but the B team is standing on your roof next to a pile of freshly kissed bums." "Unbelievable," said the voice. "We'll be right up." Zack climbed out of the cockpit, out the hatch, and jumped down onto the landing pad. He walked across to the pile of bums. Are they dead?" he said to the kisser, who was applying a fresh lip gloss to his swollen lips. "No," said the kisser, "just resting. They'll stay like that for a few weeks now. Plenty of time to be relocated to somewhere else where they can't do any harm." "Plenty of time to kick their bums too," said the kisser, surging forward. "No," said the kisser, stepping between them and the bums. "They're not hurting anybody. Leave them be." "But they're bums," said the kicker. "Dirty, stinky, rotten, no good, filthy, smelly bums." "Save your energy," said the smacker. "You're gonna need it. You've still got a very long way to go." The kicker looked at the kisser. "Whose side are you on anyway?" "Isn't that obvious?" said the kisser, dabbing at the corners of his mouth with his handkerchief, which was not quite so white anymore. "Ignore him," said the smacker. "He's spouting more hot air than those bums put together." "Boy, are we glad to see you," said a voice behind them. "Those bums have been giving us merry hell all morning." Zack turned around to see a small, officious-looking man. He was dressed like a soldier from the First World War. "Welcome to Bum Shelter number 5, he said, saluting. "I'm Captain Vincent Brown. Won't you all come inside? It's crowded, but we've always got room for more." "Thanks," said the smacker, "but we're gonna keep moving." She put her hands on Zack's shoulder. "We just want to leave young Zack here if that's okay with you." "That's fine, of course," said Captain. "Any friend of the B team is a friend of ours." Zack turned to the smacker, trying to blink back tears. "I really wish I could come with you," he said. The smacker put her arm around him. "You have to say, Zack," she said. You don't want to get mixed up with the world of bum fighting. I'm already mixed up with it, he said. That's my bum out there. I've got a responsibility to stop it. If anyone can talk it out of this, I can. No, Zach, said the smacker gently. You've got a false bum now. Put it on and forget about your first one. Here, I'll give you a hand. Just loosen your belt a little. Zach was too upset to argue. He loosened his belt. The smacker took the false bum from Zach's hand and pushed it down the back of his pants and into place. He patted it gently. How's that? She said. Zach suddenly was overwhelmed by a painful urge to go to the toilet. Where's the nearest toilet? He asked Captain Brown. Just go down the steps and turn right, he said. Zach made it just in time. He was pleased to discover that the false bum worked like a regular bum. In fact, this one was way better. It was self-wiping. Maybe Smacker was right, thought Zach. He wondered if he'd be better off staying at the bum shelter with his false bum and forgetting about his real bum. But he couldn't. His bum was trying to take over the world. He couldn't just stay there and pretend it wasn't happening. He had to do something. He knew the B team weren't going to allow him to come with him. Not if they knew about it. But what if they didn't know about it? What if he stowed away? Zach figured that all he'd have to do is stay hidden until they passed out of the range of any other bum shelters, and then have no choice to take him. It was worth a try. Zach climbed up the steps to the door. At the top of the steps there was an emergency telephone. He wondered whether he should ring his gran and let her know that he was alright, but his plan to stow away worked. If his plan to stow away worked, he might not get another chance to tell her, and there was no telling people how long he would be away. He didn't know what he would tell her, but he didn't want her to be worrying about him. He had enough to worry about, with the war and probably her own bum before too long. Zach rang her number. She picked up the receiver only after one ring, as if expecting his call. Hello? She said. Zach, is that you? Yes, Gran, said Zach, a bit surprised. How did you know? You weren't in your bed this morning. Is everything all right? Sure, Gran. I'm fine. Really? It is, Gran. I thought you might have been conscripted. Suddenly, Zach had his excuse. It was perfect. Actually, he said, I have been conscripted. I might not be home for a while. Do you know where they're sending you? She said. I'm on a secret mission, Gran, he lied. Can't say too much on the phone. Quite understand, he said. Well, thanks, Gran, said Zach. I've got to go now. Well, good luck then, she said. I just have one piece of advice for you, Zach. What's that, Gran? He said. Don't forget to wash your hands. And then she was cut off. Zach tried to ring back, but the line was dead. Why had Gran warned him to wash his hands, he wondered. It was a strange piece of advice to give somebody who was apparently going off to war. Unless it was a bum war, of course. But how could she have known that? It was probably just a grandmotherly sort of thing to say, like, look both ways before you cross the road, or remember to brush your teeth. Zach shook his head. Whatever, it wasn't... I'm gonna start that sentence again. Zach shook his head. Whatever it was, he didn't have the time to figure it out now. He had to get on board the bummobile while there was still time. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Ned Smelly. The B team was still where Zach had left them, in deep conversation with Captain Brown. And, even better still, they had their backs turned towards him, but he knew he had to be quick. Zach ran across the roof of the bum shelter and leapt onto the landing pad. He ran to the far side and hid behind one of the wheels of the bummobile. So far, so good. He now just had to work out where to hide. There was no room inside the bummobile. It would have to be in the cargo hold. He grabbed the handle of the heavy metal door and pulled it as hard as he could. The door opened easily, and there would have been plenty of room, except for the fact there were two large metal drums taking up most of the space. Zack grabbed one of the drums. He expected it to be too heavy to move, but he had to try. To his surprise, it shifted easily. It was completely empty. So was the other one. Zack lifted both the drums out and hid them behind a small shed in the back of the launching pad. There was not a moment to spare. Captain Brown, Eleanor, and the B team started walking across the landing pad. They were talking about how to dispose of the Kiss bums. "Don't touch them for a few days," said the Kisser. "Leave them until they've degassed themselves. They'll be less dangerous to move." Zack dived into the cargo hold and pulled the door shut behind him. It was cold, and there was a ridge of metal sticking into his back. But even though he was uncomfortable, Zack knew he was doing the right things. He heard footsteps approaching the bummobile. "Zack's taking a long time," said Eleanor. "Probably upset that he couldn't come with us," said the Smacker. "We might have to leave without saying goodbye." "Don't worry," said Captain Brown. "I'll see he's taken care of." "Thanks," said the Smacker. "Tell him we're sorry we had to go, but there was not a moment to lose." "Will do," said the captain. "Good luck." "Good luck nothing," said the Kicker. "I'll kick their bums so hard they wish I'd never had them." "But they are bums," said Eleanor. "How can a bum not have a bum? It would just be a hole." "I'd kick that as well," said the Kicker. Zack heard them climb inside the bummobile. "Prepare for takeoff," said Eleanor. The bummobile roared into life. Zack felt it rise slowly through the air, and then Eleanor fired the thrusters and the bummobile took off. Thrusters were near the cargo hold, and Zack could feel the heat coming through the floor. It was radiating up through his fake bum. I hope fake bums were waterproof as well as self-wiping. But despite being cramped and having a hot bum, Zack was warm and sleepy, and he closed his eyes. He wasn't sure how much longer it was until he opened them again, but he knew he'd had a good sleep. He could hear shouting, "We should kick their bums," ranted Kicker. "It's the only way." "Now listen up," said the Smacker. "This is no ordinary mission. We could be in for the fight of our lives. Our success is going to depend on us working as a team, not just going in and kicking, smacking, kissing, and shooting. We're going to have to work smarter than that." "And then we'll kick their bums," said Kicker. Zack heard Smacker sigh. "Yes," she agreed as if talking to a child. "Then we'll kick their bums." "I've got the bumcano on the radar," said Eleanor. "It's incredible. I've never seen so much bum activity concentrated on one spot. And there are bums pouring in from all directions." "How far away is it?" said the Kisser. "I'd say about 6 hours of flying. We have to cross the great windy desert." "What's the pong factor outside?" said the Smacker. "Extreme," said Eleanor. "We must be approaching the desert now." Bummobile lurched sideways. Zack started to feel sick again. "Oh no," said Eleanor. "Hold on to your hats. There's lots of wind out there." An alarm sounded. The bummobile started to shake as it went into a series of violent dips and climbs. "Oh no," said Eleanor. "We're out of gas, just what we needed." "Have you got reserve tanks?" said the Smacker. "Yeah, I've got 2 cans in the cargo hold." A fresh wave of nausea flooded Zack, but this wasn't anything to do with the movement of the bummobile. It was to do with the 2 cans he had removed from the cargo hold. He didn't feel any better either when he realized that what he thought was a wall between him and the cabin was in fact a sliding door. Zack rolled back as far as possible, but it was too late. The door slid open, light flooded in, and the Smacker was staring at him. "Zack," she said, frowning. "What on earth are you doing here?" Zack looked at her. He couldn't bring himself to tell her what he had done. He didn't have to. "There's supposed to be 2 spare gas tanks in here. And you took them out to make room for yourself, didn't you?" "I thought they were empty," he said. "They were so light." "Bummobile gas is lighter than air," said the Smacker, flexing her enormous hand, which Zack was scared she would soon be using them. "Have you found them?" said Eleanor. "I can't hold it much longer." "All I've got's a stowaway," said the Smacker, yanking Zack out of the hold. "What?" said Eleanor, glancing around. "Zack, but what? Why? Where are the fuel tanks?" He removed them, said the smacker. I told you he was a bum sympathizer, roared the kicker. He's on their side. He sabotaged us. I'm gonna kick your... Suddenly, the Bummobile lurched sideways and went into a nosedive. We're going to crash, yelled Eleanor. Brace yourselves. Eleanor and the kisser curled over into the crouch position. The kicker and smacker both grabbed handholds and pushed their backs against the Bummobile wall. Zack sat down, put his arms over his head, and waited for the crash. He didn't have to wait long. Wham! The Bummobile hit the ground. Zack was thrown forwards to the hatch. He put his hands out in front of him. The hatch opened, and he went flying out and landed headfirst in an enormous clump of thistles. But they weren't normal thistles. They seemed to be made of stainless steel, and they stank. Luckily, the needle-like thorns had missed Zack's eye, but he felt like they were stuck in every other part of his body. But even worse was the smell. It was hot. It was strong. What next, thought Zack. As if having his own bum trying to take over the world wasn't bad enough, he had now caused the B-team to crash their Bummobile. For all he knew, that it could all be dead. As usual, it was his fault. Then he heard Eleanor. Zack, you idiot! I'm going to kill you! Can you get these thistles out of me first? He asked. He felt Eleanor's hand around his ankle. It was one hard yank pulled them free. Ah! Screamed Zack as hundreds of needles were pulled from his flesh at the same time. Easy does it. Easy does nothing, said Eleanor. You're in big trouble. Zack was lying on his back on hot sand, looking up at Eleanor's face as if in a nightmare. Her eyes were bugged out, and she appeared to be frothing at the mouth. Above her, the sky was a brilliant blue, and the wind roared around them, blowing sand into Zack's ears, eyes, and mouth. You idiot! You absolute idiot! You idiot, stupid, moron, bloody, idiotic idiot! But, Zack said, don't interrupt me! I haven't finished yet! You crazy, lame-brained, pathetic, dumb klutz fool! You forgot idiot, said Zack. But Eleanor's only response was to put her hands around Zack's throat and start squeezing as hard as he could. No, Eleanor! But all that came out was high-pitched he yelled, but all that came out was high-pitched, strangling noise. In the distance, Zack could see the Bummobile stuck nose first in the sand. It was planted almost vertically, but apart from the Bummobile there was absolutely nothing. Just desert, as far as he could see. Hot, windy, stinky desert, broken only by the occasional clump of needle thistles. It was very much what Zack had imagined hell would look like, except without the flames. I really don't think you should do that, said a voice. You might hurt him. That's exactly what I intend to do, said Eleanor. No, said the voice. I think that's a bad idea. Life is hard enough out here. You got any better ideas? Said Eleanor. Yes, said the voice. Let him go. And have some of this oxygen. I think you might be suffering from methane madness. Zack felt Eleanor's hands release their grip on his throat. Zack looked up and saw a strange-looking man. He looked like a desert castaway. He had a long beard and was wearing frayed, torn pants cut off at the knees. His skin was burnt in a deep reddish-brown color by the intense sun. But the really strange thing about him was that he was wearing scuba diving gear, twin oxygen tanks on his back, a mouthpiece, and a face mask. He took the mouthpiece out of his mouth and gave it to Eleanor. She gulped deeply. Hey, not too fast, he said. Just take it slowly. Once she was calm, he knelt down next to Zack, who was still coughing and choking. Here, offering Zack the mouthpiece. Take some of this. The methane in the desert wind is pretty poisonous. It does strange things to your head. Breathe it for too long, it will kill you. Zack took some deep lungfuls of oxygen. It felt wonderful. After a couple of minutes, the man pulled the mouthpiece back out of Zack's hands and took a few breaths himself. Suddenly, Eleanor jumped up screaming, slapping at her legs. What's the matter? There's something in my pants. Don't worry, he said. It's probably just stink ants. They won't hurt you. Try not to squash them, though. Why? Said Eleanor, still hopping and slapping. Because if they pop, they stink, said the man matter-of-factly. Eleanor immediately stopped her mad dance and stood there squirming instead. So, what should I do? She said. Just stand still, said the man. He pulled a small cloth bag from the pocket of his shorts, opened the neck and poured some small white crystals around her feet. What is this? Said Eleanor. Needleweed sugar, he said. It's very sweet, and they love it. Zack watched in amazement as a line of fiery red ants appeared at the bottom of Eleanor's trouser legs, marched across her feet, and swarmed all over the sugar. Amazing things, stink ants, said the man. They're the only things that can survive out here. Well, except for me and the needleweeds. Zack winced. He already knew about the needleweeds. You live out here? Said Eleanor, staring at the man, as if completely mad. Yes, he said. The great windy desert is where the old farts come to die, including me. He laughed in a wheezy, high-pitched way, which degenerated into a coughing fit. He took a few mouthfuls of oxygen. He held out his hand. My name is Ned. Ned Smelly. Ned Smelly? Said Eleanor. Didn't you used to be a bum hunter? He nodded slowly. How do you know that? I've heard my father talk about you. Your father's a bum hunter? He said. What's his name? Silas, said Eleanor. Ah, Silas, he said. The greatest of the greats. We hunted together on many occasions. In fact, he was with me on my last hunt. Hunt that earned me my name. You see, I haven't always been called Ned Smelly, but after our run-in with the Stinchinator, the great unwiped bum, I was never the same. What happened? Said Zack. Well, said Ned, to cut a long story short, I copped a full blast from the beast. To this day, I haven't been able to get rid of the stench. That's why I live out here on the edge of the great windy desert. My body odor is too offensive for normal human company. I can't smell anything, said Zack. Oh yeah, said Ned, raising his arm up and exposing his armpit. Zack wasn't even close, but it was the worst thing he had ever smelt. The smell was so bad he started clawing at his nose to try and rip it off his face. Hey, steady on, said Zack, offering his oxygen mouthpiece. Have some of this. Zack breathed it in and calmed down. Thanks, he said. I needed that. Your father, as usual, came away from the encounter unscathed, said Ned. But the Stenchinator remains, to this day, living in the brown forest. But it was the black forest, said Zack. Not anymore, said Ned. Not since the Stenchinator took up residence there. Ned turned to Eleanor. Is there anyone else in the bummobile? Oh no, said Eleanor. The B team! I completely forgot about them. Come on! Ned and Eleanor ran towards the bummobile. Zack followed them, but he couldn't run. His feet were still full of needleweeds. By the time Zack got there, Ned and Eleanor had pulled out the kicker, the smacker, the kisser out of the bummobile and laid them in the shade of one of the wings. They were unconscious, but Ned used his oxygen tank to revive them, and pretty soon they were all coughing and spluttering, and the kicker was threatening to kick Zack bum again. After thinking that he might have killed them all, Zack felt relieved and almost happy to hear the kicker's threat again. In fact, he would have been glad if the kicker had followed through. Zack knew he deserved it. What brings you out here anyway? Said Ned, passing the smacker his mouthpiece. The smacker explained the situation. That would explain all the flying bums I've been seeing lately, said Ned. Thousands of them, all flying north, big packs. There goes one now. They all looked up and into the dazzling blue sky and saw a squadron of bums flying in a large bum-shaped formation, sounding like a squadron of bombers. Wow, said the kisser. What a sight. There must be at least 10,000 of them up there. I wish my legs were longer, said the kicker, so I could give them what's coming to them. The bums moved surprisingly fast across the sky. The group watched them until they disappeared over the horizon. Why is the sky so blue here? Said Zack. It's the methane, said Ned. It intensifies all the colors, but it makes you go a bit crazy. Everyone knows that, said Eleanor, looking at Zack pointedly. Zack shrugged and looked at the ground. Go easy on that, said the smacker. We've all got to learn sometimes, and I reckon Zack's been on a pretty steep learning curve in the last 24 hours. Yeah, said Eleanor. Now he knows why it's a dumb idea to remove spare gas cans from the bummobile. I ought to kick your bum, said the smacker, staring at Zack with his unblinking red eyes, his face impassive and his voice low and dangerous. Here, have some oxygen, you two, said Ned, rushing across with the mouthpiece. You're getting overheated. As Eleanor and Kicker gulped their oxygen, Ned turned to the smacker. I've got to get you all inside, said Ned. Methane madness will send you all insane. Why don't you come back to my shack? It's air-conditioned. Rest, have a meal. Impossible, said the smacker. We haven't got time. We have to get to the bum-cano before it's too late. And how exactly do you do that? Plan to do that, said Ned. You're not going to be going anywhere in that bummobile in a hurry. Zack could see he was right. The bummobile was a mess. Do you know where we could get another bummobile? Asked the smacker. Ned shook his head. The only bummobiles around here are the ones that crash. I keep a shed full of spare parts. I trade them occasionally for oxygen tanks. I may be able to fix yours. How long will it take? Said the smacker. Hard to say, said Ned. 1, maybe 2 weeks, perhaps a month. We haven't got that much time, said the smacker, jumping up and grabbing Ned by the collar. Don't you see? It'll all be over by then. A world controlled by bums. Is that what you want? He was screaming and shaking Ned by the throat. Gasped Ned. Oxygen! Zack grabbed the tank off Eleanor and rushed it to Ned and offered him the mouthpiece. Not me, said Ned, pushing it towards the smacker. Her! Zack pushed the mouthpiece into the smacker's mouth. She breathed deeply, her arms relaxed. Ned removed her hands from around his throat. I'm sorry, said the smacker. I don't know what came over me. It's alright, said Ned. The effects of methane madness are nothing new to me. It can do really strange things with your head. I spent the first 6 months of my time here in methane delirium. I thought I was the king of a large country, and all the stink ants were my subjects. That was until I was able to build up a shack and rig up basic and air filtering system and calmed myself down. Zack wasn't sure that Ned wasn't still in some form of delirium. After all, he lived in the Great Windy Desert, one of the most vilest places on Earth as far as Zack could see. And the smell. The truth of the matter, said Ned, is that you can't make it without a bummobile. We'll go by foot, said the smacker. Are you kidding? Said Ned. Look, I've been to this bumcano. You have? Said Eleanor. Yes, said Ned. I went there with your father once. It's located on a small island in the middle of the Sea of Bums. Heard of it? Of course, said Eleanor. The sea contains some of the oldest bums in the world. And some of the most dangerous, said Ned. Bums with teeth. Bums with electrical charges. Huge stinging bum rays that span 20 meters. Are you trying to scare us? Said the smacker. I'm trying to make sure you see reason, said Ned. To get there by foot, you're going to have to face 3 of the most impossibly difficult, if not downright suicidal challenges in the world. You're going to have to cross the windy desert, a tall order for starters, and if by some miracle you survive that, you have to fight your way through the brown forest, which is full of stink bobs and home to the Stenchinator. And then supposedly, and just supposing, you beat all the odds and survive those challenges, you're going to have to sail across the Sea of Bums. No easy matter, considering it's not only full with deep-sea bum monsters that I've mentioned, but some of the homes to the siren bums, some of the wildest and unpredictable storms in the face of the earth. All of this without a boat. It sounded to Zack pretty convincing argument to stay put, but Smacker smiled. What's so funny? Said Ned. I thought you said this was going to be difficult. You did, Nuke. You almost got me with the... We're just taking a quick break here. Oh man. Can't wait to wake up tomorrow morning and not be able to talk. It's gonna be great. An hour later, after Ned had managed to convince the B team that they were at the very least, it would be a folly attempt to cross the Great Windy Desert without the benefit of a spare oxygen tanks. They were sitting in Ned's shack while he prepared a meal. "I hope you're hungry," said Ned, "because there's plenty here." Zack was surprised by how spacious Ned's shack was. It appeared to be mostly cobbled together using the debris of crashed bummobiles. The chairs had been ripped from a bummobile cockpits, the windows made from their windshields. Ned placed an enormous colander of what looked like steaming dark green seaweed on the table in front of the group. Whatever it was, Zack didn't think it looked very appetizing, and smelt even worse. But that was heaven compared to what came next. Ned placed a sizzling frying pan onto the table, and it was full of something that was bright red and smelt of a smell which made Zack's eyes water and his nose burn. "Well, don't be shy," said Ned. "Eat up. Needleweeds and stink ants are best eaten hot." "Needleweeds and stink ants?" said Eleanor. Zack could see he wasn't alone in his reaction. He watched as everyone at the table, except Ned, sat there, smiling politely, not knowing whether to vomit or simply pass out. "Don't worry," said Ned. "I've de-needled the needleweeds and I've unstunk the ants. It's perfectly safe and very nutritious. I've eaten nothing else for years." And also saying excuse me. And so saying, he heaped a large steaming pile of needleweeds onto his plate, sprinkled it with stink ants, and placed a big spoonful in his mouth. And then pushed the colander towards Kicker. "I'd rather eat dog sick," muttered the Kicker. The smacker gave him a huge jolt from her elbow. Ned looked up. His mouth was full of needleweeds and was frowning. "I beg your pardon?" He said, "I'd better dig in quick," said the smacker, seizing the serving forks and putting a small amount on Kicker's plate, "because it looks delicious and it may not last long." "Oh, no need to worry about that," said Ned. "There's no shortage. This is the Great Windy Desert, you know. If we run out, I can easily scare up some more." The smacker served the Kicker, ladled out a tiny amount for herself, and then pushed the bowl across the table to Kisser and Eleanor, whose faces were both white. "After you," Kisser said to Eleanor, pushing the bowl towards her. "No, after you," said Eleanor, pushing it back. No, said the Kisser. "Ladies first, I insist." "You're too kind," said Eleanor, her eyes narrowed. "Don't mention it," said the Kisser. "Oh, but you are," said Eleanor, taking the serving forks. "The least I could do is serve it for you first." And with that, Eleanor began piling the Kisser's plate high with evil-smelling concoction. "That's enough," said the Kisser. "No more, I beg you." "Don't be silly. You haven't got any stink ants on your plate yet," said Eleanor, impeding most of the bowl onto his plate. "Yep," said Ned, who was shoveling his food into his mouth at an incredible rate. "Great source of protein. What about you, Zack? Not eating?" Zack was trying to think of an excuse for not eating when Eleanor grabbed his plate. "I was just about to serve him," she said. "No, that's quite alright," said Zack, trying to grab his plate back. But Eleanor was too quick. She piled what remained of the needleweeds onto his plate and what was left of the stink ants. "There you go," she said, flashing Zack the fakest sweet smile he'd ever seen. "Eat up now. That's a good boy. Thanks, he said. But what about you? Don't you want some too? I'd love to, she said, but I'm on a diet. I can eat pretty much anything I want except for stink ants and needleweeds. It's a pity. They look delicious. I've got some sprouts in the cupboard, said Ned. Left over from the last plague. They're a bit dry, but quite edible. No, it's okay, thanks, said Eleanor quickly. Besides, I better get our gear ready. We've got a long trek ahead of us, and we want to get as far as we can before sunset. Okay, said Ned, picking up his plate and licking it clean. I'll come prepare your oxygen tanks. Zack sat there, staring at the green pile in front of him. The kicker was right. Dog sick would be better than this. He picked up a forkful of the seaweed-like needleweeds and put them in his mouth and tried to chew, but he felt the urge to vomit again. Excuse me, Ned, said Zack. Which way to the bathroom? Into the corridor, he said. Zack ran, went in, shut the door, and knelt down in front of the toilet bowl. But away from the smell of dinner and the stench of Ned, he felt better instantly. He looked around the bathroom. Like the rest of the house, it had been put together from remains of bummobiles. There was a 44-gallon drum which had been cut in half to form a bath, a sheet of stainless steel which attached the bathroom wall to serve as a mirror. Beside it was a large cabinet. It looked like the cabinet that housed the bum gun arsenal in Eleanor's bummobile. Zack pulled it open, curious to see if Ned had kept the same array of weapons, but what he saw was unexpected. There was every type of soap, perfume, BO spray you could imagine. Cakes of soap stacked high, liquid soap dispensers, roll-on deodorants, stick-on deodorants, spray deodorants, and at least 50 bottles of perfume, mouthwash, and aftershave, as well as 30 different brands of toothpaste. Poor Ned, thought Zack. He had salvaged and presumably used all these products, yet still smelt terrible. And here he was trying to look after them, and all they could do in return was be rude about his food. Zack went back to the table. The others had left. Their plates were still full of food. Zack grabbed a spoon and started to eat. He didn't stop until he'd eaten everything on his plate, and then ate everyone else's servings as well. After Zack had finished, he went outside to Ned's shed, where the others were getting suited up. Ned's shed resembled a wrecker's warehouse, stocked with every conceivable bummobile spare part and accessory. Ned had obviously been collecting bummobile debris for a long time. Hey, said the kicker, pointing at the panel on the wall of the front section of a bummobile with 306 BF paint on the side of that. Didn't that belong to the F team? I think you're right, said the smacker, strapping an oxygen tank to her back and going over to examine the panel more carefully. How long ago did you find this, Ned? Ned looked up from the belt he was adjusting for Eleanor while she stood there pinching her nose. He said. About 4 years ago. I found it in the Great Basin Valley about an hour north of here. 4 years ago? Said the kicker. That's when they disappeared. So that's what happened to them. Were there any survivors? None, said Ned. By the time I found them, they were just bleached bones in the sand. The stink ants had stripped them clean. I thought you said stink ants were harmless, said Eleanor. Mostly, said Ned. The ones around here are. But the further you go into the desert, the larger and more aggressive they become. Eleanor made a face, and Ned went back to adjusting her tank. Any stink ants come around near me, I'll kick their bums, growled the kicker. How can you kick an ant's bum? Said Eleanor. Wouldn't it be too small? No bum is too small for me to kick, said the kicker. Why not just step on them? Said Kisser. Because I like kicking, said Kicker. You got a problem with that? Not a problem at all, said the Kisser. I just sometimes wonder if kicking is the best answer to everything. What's wrong with you? Said the Kicker. You're talking like a bum sympathizer, and you know what I do to bum sympathizers. Yes, sighed Kisser. I think I can guess. Yeah, sputtered the Kicker, scraping the ground with his foot like a bull about to charge. Well, guess then. Oxygen, Kicker, commanded Ned. Kicker took his mouthpiece and took a deep breath. I want you all to take oxygen at least 5 times an hour. Any more, you risk of running out before crossing the desert. Any less, and you risk methane madness. Any questions? What about when we were asleep? Said Zack. No one's going to be asleep, said Eleanor. If you want your beauty sleep, you'd better stay here. Zack looked at Smacker and she nodded. Eleanor's right, Zack. You think you can handle the pace? I sure can, he lied. The truth was, he didn't know if he could handle the pace. He'd never done a non-stop 3-day trek through the desert full of methane and flesh-eating stink ants before. But he was determined to find his bum and get it before it did anything really insane, and before Kicker kicked it to pieces. And as much as he liked Ned, he wasn't too keen to spend moments more at the shack that he had to. Eleanor pushed a pack into Zack's hand. Here are your rations, she said. She gave packs to everyone else. I put as much food and water in the packs will hold. Go easy, because I'm not sure how long we'll have to hold out. Zack pushed his breathing tank to the side and put on the pack. The supplies were heavy, but he'd figured it'd beat eating needleweeds and stink ants. Ned, said Eleanor, patting a pile of boxes, these provisions are for you. We can't carry them, so you might as well have them. Ned's eyes filled with tears. He seemed overwhelmed with Eleanor's generosity. Thank you, he said, reaching out to hug Eleanor, who had took 2 quick steps backwards. Thank you very much. I only wish you could stay longer. It's been good having your company. We'll call in on the way back, said the Smacker. I'll have a meal of needleweeds and stink ants waiting for you, said Ned. The group trudged out of Ned's shed and into the desert. The sky seemed bluer than ever, and the sand even more yellow, and the heat and wind even more intense. They pulled on the diving masks Ned had given them, took a deep breath of oxygen, and waved goodbye to Ned. Good luck, said Ned, standing in the doorway of his shack. God knows you're going to need it. We're gonna kick their bums, yelled Kicker above the roar of the wind. End of chapter 4. Thank you very much for that follow. I appreciate it. Welcome on in. We are currently reading, doing a bit of a book read of The Day My Bum Went Psycho, a book by Andy Griffiths. And we got some ducks going as well. Thanks for checking in. I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. We are about halfway through the book now. Just kidding. No, we're about halfway through. It's about 10 chapters long. We'll probably do this one last chapter and then we'll call it. And that is chapter number 5, Methane Madness. The wind roared. Zack trudged, sometimes sinking down to his knees in the loose sand. He fought his way out, sucked on his oxygen. He trudged. The wind roared. It was hard work, and not just for Zack. After about 10 minutes, the kisser called for a rest. I have to go back, he said. I think I left my lip gloss behind. Can't you pick it up on the way back? Said Eleanor. No, said the kisser. Without my lip gloss, I run the risk of my lips cracking. And without my lips, I'm completely powerless. Alright, said the Smacker. Go back and get it. We'll wait. But hurry up. We've already lost a lot of time. Kisser nodded and turned back. Eleanor and Smacker were clearly annoyed by the interruption, but Zack was glad for the rest. He sat back on his pack and took a deep gulp of oxygen. He then took a deep gulp of water, and then another gulp of oxygen. Go steady on that, said the Smacker. Remember what Ned said. Don't use it all up now. Yeah, I know, said Zack. It's just the air's so thin, I can hardly breathe. I knew we shouldn't have let him come, said Eleanor. He got us into this mess in the first place, and now all he's doing now is complaining about it. Calm down, said the Smacker. The only person who's holding us up at the moment is the kisser, and he's more experienced than most of us. Eleanor snorted. Zack lay back on his pack, closed his eyes, and tried to imagine he was anywhere else but the great windy desert. He thought about swimming at his local swimming pool, with his real bum. The water was wet, cool, and there was lots of shade. He was woken up by a sharp pain in his arm. He opened his eyes. Kicker was standing there, about to kick him. "Wake up," he said. "We're moving." Zach got up. The kisser was back. He was standing there applying lip gloss with the tip of his finger, very gently and delicately, even though he would... And even though he was wearing a three-piece suit, he seemed to have hardly broken a sweat. Even the carnation in his lapel looked fresh. They began marching again. Eleanor, who was out front, followed by the smacker. The kisser was in the middle. Zach was behind him, but was having trouble keeping up because his stomach was aching. The pain had started soon after they had left Ned's place, and it had gradually become worse. He wondered if it had been such a great idea to eat so many needleweeds and stink ants. Behind Zach was the kicker, who, true to his name, gave Zach a kick every time on his false bum he slowed down. "Cut it out, will you?" said Zach after a particularly violent kick. "Keep up with everyone else," said the kicker, "and I won't have to kick you." Kisser turned around. "Lay off him, Kicker," he said. "He's just a kid." "Gotta keep up with everyone else," grumbled the kicker. "Let me put it this way," said the kisser. "Kick him in the bum again, and I'll kiss you." "If you lay so much as a lip on me, I'll kick your bum," growled the kicker. "Oxygen, you two," said the smacker. They obediently took their oxygen as Smacker commanded, and the group resumed trudging. With one difference. The kicker stopped kicking Zach. They trudged. The wind roared. They sucked their oxygen, drank their water, ate their anti-bum energy bars, and kept trudging through the harsh, flat desert. The horizon broke only by the ugly, jagged clumps of needleweeds. They trudged until the sun went down, till the moon came up, till the moon went down, and the sun came up. There was very little talk. They were all too tired to talk. They only had the energy to trudge. Excuse me. No worries. Welcome on in, like I said. Glad you're enjoying the book. The sun was high in the blue sky when they came across the wreck of the bummobile that the kicker had recognized belonged to the F team. Much of its shell was submerged in the sand. The kicker stopped and started digging. He pulled out a long white bone and studied it. He shook his head. "They were a good team," he said. "Saved my life once. Pity I'm too late to return the favor." He laid the bone carefully back into the sand and covered it. Zach watched a single tear creep from the edge of the kicker's eye down his cheek and make a small dark circle on the top of the mound of sand. Group resumed trudging, not wanting to stand in one place for too long as the stink ants would cover their boots within moments. Zach checked his oxygen supply gauge. It was low. He wondered whether he'd end up like the F team, just a pile of bones in the sand. They'd been trekking up a sandhill for what felt like forever to Zach when he drank the last mouthful of water from his canteen. Knowing that he had no more water made him seem thirstier than ever. He couldn't stand it. All he could think about was his water. "I'd give anything for a glass of water," he said. "A big, cool glass of water. Big enough to swim in." "I could go for a pint of beer," said the kicker. "I'd settle for a barmaid's lips," said the kisser, applying more lip gloss. "Just a pair of soft red lips." You know what I would kill for," said the smacker. "A massage. That's all I want. I'm aching all over. Eleanor, what would you have?" "An ice cream," said Eleanor dreamily. "A double-headed Dairy Cream with nuts and sprinkles and chocolate coating. As she said this, they reached the top of the dune. Zach couldn't believe what he saw. None of them could. There, spread out below was a vast blue lake of crystal clear, sparkling water. All around its edges were palm trees with big shady branches. "Wow," said Zach. "An oasis." "That's funny," said the smacker, frowning. "Ned didn't say anything about an oasis." "That's probably because he's never made it this far before," said the kicker. "Last one in's a rotten bum," said Eleanor, taking off down the hill towards the lake. Zach threw off his pack to chase after her. He heard Smacker calling him back. There was no way Zack was going back. He wanted that water. Zack turned around and beckoned to the Smacker, Kicker, and Kisser to join him. He saw the B team shrug and start to run after them. Zack grinned, turned, and kept running. But Eleanor was unbeatable with her head start. She threw off her pack and oxygen tank and weapons as she ran and dived in fully clothed. Zack made it a close second. He was followed by Kisser and Kicker, who both hit the water at the same time, creating a massive splash. Smacker was last but not least, created the biggest splash of all. Zack treaded the water, every pore of his skin drinking into the wetness. After more than 36 hours in the great windy desert, the cool water was just what he needed. Eleanor splashed a handful of water at him. Zack splashed back. She laughed. It was the first time Zack had heard her laugh since he'd met her. He had to admit to himself that she looked pretty, especially when she wasn't frowning or calling him an idiot. Suddenly, Kicker started yelling. "Look! A bar!" Zack looked, and sure enough, there was a small hut with a thatched roof. At the front of it was a friendly-looking barmaid leaning on the counter. Behind her were shelves lined with bottles. "And a barmaid!" yelled the Kisser. "With lips!" She waved at them. "And an ice cream van." That was funny, thought Zack. He hadn't noticed that before. But parked right beside the tropical bar was a colourful ice cream van playing a distorted rendition of Greensleeves. "A massage table," said the Smacker. "And a monsieur. What are we waiting for?" She yelled. "Let's go!" They ran out of the water and up the beach to the bar, and the ice cream van, and the masseuse. Zack looked around in wonder. All thoughts of psycho bums and bum hunting Great Windy Desert were completely out of his mind. Eleanor came towards him holding 2 double-decker Dairy Queen cones. She handed him one. He took it, licked the top off, and bit into the cold, creamy center. It was heaven. The Kicker was leaning against the bar, his head back, tipping the last of his pint into his throat. He slammed the glass down on the counter beside him, burped, and wiped his hand across his mouth. "I'll have another," he said loudly, but the barmaid wasn't listening. She was too busy giggling and flirting with the Kisser, so the Kicker reached over, grabbed the tap, and filled up the glass himself. Meanwhile, the Smacker was lying on the massage table, her face a mixture of something like pleasure and pain as the muscle-bound monsieur chopped and smacked and pummeled her body, paying particular attention to her meaty hands. Zack turned to Eleanor. They raised their ice creams and cheers to each other. It was all so perfect, so beautiful. Zack felt it had been worth every painful moment of the last 36 hours. He took another bite of his ice cream. Something was wrong. It wasn't soft and sweet like before. It was hard and gritty and tasted like stink ants. Zack looked at the cone. It was covered in stink ants. So was his hand and his arm and his whole body covered in stink ants, biting, burning, and eating him alive. He looked around. The lake had disappeared. So had the bar and the ice cream van and the monsieur. They were all lying on the sand, covered in stink ants. Everybody started screaming. They jumped up and brushed wildly at the ants. They were all doing the same mad wild dance. The ants biting and popping and stinking in equal measure. Zack realized that none of what they had just experienced was real. It was madness. Methane madness. And judging by what they could see on the horizon, it was not over yet. The biggest, dirtiest, blackest, most terrifying tornado was twisting towards them, snaking and whipping at high speed with a terrifying roar. "Stink tornado!" yelled the Smacker. "Run!" But no one needed to be told to run, least of all Zack. He was already running, as fast as he could. But it wasn't easy running across the sand, because it was more like wading rather than running. He was wading in slow motion, still trying to brush the stink ants off his arms, his face, out of his eyes, ears, and nose. All while the roar of a tornado was getting louder and louder behind him. The sky was no longer blue. It was a deep purple. The air thick with sand. "We're not going to make it," yelled the Kisser. "We're doomed!" As far as Zack could tell, the Kisser was right. There was nowhere they could run to get away from the tornado. Zach dropped to his knees, flattened himself against the sand, and prayed the tornado would pass over him. He felt a sharp pain in his ribs. He looked up. It was the kisser, staggering around, blinded by the sand, his hands desperately clawing at the air in front of him. "Get down!" yelled Zach. But Kisser obviously couldn't hear him above the deadly roar of the tornado. Zach pushed himself up, grabbed the kisser's hand, and pulled him down. But it was impossible. The kisser's body was floating in the air above him. It was as if he was a helium balloon Zach had just wanted to show. Then he was sucked up into the tornado, Zach along with him. It was the wildest, craziest merry-go-round of Zach's life. He was being spun around as if he was no heavier than a piece of confetti, rising higher and higher all the time. The air around him flashed red and silver with stink ants and needleweeds. He saw other objects too, the shell of an old bumblebee, a bleached human skeleton, a gigantic stink ant. Zach held on to the kisser as if his life depended on it, which it did. Suddenly, Eleanor floated in front of his face. With his free hand, Zach grabbed her. Eleanor grabbed his arm. "We need to swim to the middle," yelled Eleanor. "To the eye of the tornado. We will be safer there, and we can drop straight to the ground." She started kicking her legs and holding her free arm out like an aeroplane. Zach motioned Kisser to do the same. The kisser, though clearly terrified, nodded and started flapping his arm and kissing. The closer they got to the center, the faster they seemed to be moving. Zach found it difficult to see clearly. But there was no mistaking Smacker and Kicker as they clearly floated into view, holding on to each other. The Smacker reached out and grabbed Eleanor's hand, and with the extra weight they were able to make faster progress towards the center of the tornado. All of a sudden, the roaring stopped. There was no sound at all. Zach realized they were dropping down through the eye of the tornado at high speed. The ground was coming up fast. "What do we do now?" he yelled at Smacker. "Hope for the best. Hope for the best," she said. "Okay," said Zach. He closed his eyes. It felt like the G-forces were sucking his face off. Zach screamed and blacked out. When he came to, his face was resting on something soft and smelly. It looked like mud. It smelled like mud. It tasted like mud. It was mud. Zach lifted his head up, spat, wiped his cheek off and looked around. He was in a forest. Everything was wet and muddy and brown. The mud, the trees, even the sky, all brown. Like most places he visited in the last 24 hours, it stunk. But the stink was slightly different. It was more the smell of rotting wood, of decay, of dank mold. Mold? Mud. In the distance, Zach could hear voices. He picked himself out of the mud and pushed through some densely packed trees, the ground sucking at his feet as if reluctant to let him go. From the edge of the small clearing, Zach could see 4 figures, each as brown as the forest. One of them waved at him. "Zach!" called the Smacker. "Over here!" Zach walked across to him, squelching up to his ankles in mud. "Welcome to the brown forest," said the Smacker. Zach gasped. The brown forest? He remembered that Ned had mentioned the brown forest. He also remembered that Ned had mentioned the Stenchinator, the great unwiped bum who lived in the brown forest, and Zach did not want to meet them. Alright, just going to take a short break. And then we will carry on. Need a drink. Getting thirsty. Hope you guys are enjoying this. This is something that's just a little bit different to what we would normally do. Oh yes? And also, we've only got less than 24 hours if you want to nominate the stream for Twitch Australia New Zealand Grassroots. I'd really appreciate it if you enjoy the stream for a nomination that way. And potentially we could feature on Twitch Australia New Zealand homepage or front page, or and on Twitch Australia New Zealand social media. So fingers crossed, baby. Pop the shoulders back. Yeah. Alrighty. So for those who might have been watching ads there, I was just talking about the bot posting about the Grassroots Showcase. So it's just an opportunity to be featured on the front page of Twitch Australia and New Zealand and featured on their socials. So if you like what you're seeing and you want to nominate us, you're more than welcome to. Just follow that link. Just a Google form you fill out. It would be super cool and a really cool opportunity. Anyway, back into the story. Stenchinator was listed in the Bumper Book of Bums as the stinkiest bum in the world. Most bums only register 1 or 2 points on the rectum scale, but the Stenchinator came into a nose-bruising 9.8 points, which made him even stinkier than the Great White Bum, although nowhere near as intelligent. "We've got to get out of here," said Zach. "Stenchinator is going to find us." "Don't worry," said the Smacker. "He's not anywhere around here." "How do you know?" said Zach. "We'd smell him," said the Smacker. "But it smells pretty bad already," said Zach. "I know," said the Smacker, "but believe me, the Stenchinator smells a whole lot worse." "I say, we catch some bums, set them up, and have a look around," said the Kicker. This was the first time Zach had heard the Kicker mention bums without threatening to kick them. "And how do we do that?" said Eleanor. "We've lost everything we had in the tornado. We don't have any bait. We don't even have fluffy pink toilet seat cover." "I do," said Zach, pulling the seat cover out of his utility belt. "How about this?" he said, handing it to Eleanor. She eyed it critically. "We're worn out, but it'll do," she said. Zach noticed that despite the fun they had had in the methane delirium, Eleanor was obviously still in no mood to forgive him. "This might be a dumb question," said Zach, "but how is a fluffy pink toilet seat cover going to help us?" "Bums love fluffy pink toilet seat covers," explained the Kisser. "In fact, they're powerless to resist them. Place a fluffy pink toilet seat cover out in the open and bums will come. You can be sure of that. Then it's just a simple matter of catching them, corking them, and sitting on top." "I don't suppose you've got a net as well," said Eleanor. "As a matter of fact," said Zach, "I do." He pulled a small net out of the belt. Zach had to admire the bum catcher. He thought of everything. Zach gave the net to Eleanor. She examined it. She said. "Not too bad, but on the small side. It'll have to do, I suppose." Gizzard took the pink fluffy toilet seat cover from Eleanor. "Watch this," he said to Zach. He walked into the middle of the clearing, placed it on the ground, and then returned to the others where they were hiding, behind a large mouldy tree trunk. Give them a few minutes," he said. "Eleanor, you ready with that net?" "Ready," said Eleanor, crouching in the sprint position. They didn't have to wait long. The first bum arrived was a small pink one with a large pimple on its left cheek. Zach watched it fly down out of the sky, a line about a meter from the seat from the seat cover. My tablet screen just turned off on them. Right. The bum took a few cautious steps towards it, then stopped. looking around as if suspecting a trap. Then, having satisfied itself that all was in order, the bum leaped into the middle of the seat cover, wriggling with contentment on the fluffy pink fur. Whispered the kisser. Eleanor shot out and threw the net over it. The bum didn't even try to get away. It just seemed to nestle deeper into the seat cover. Eleanor brought it back and handed it to Zach. That can be yours. It was small and won't have much power. Thanks, said Zach, holding the wriggling and squirming bum as far away from him as possible. When bums were frightened, there was no telling what they're capable of doing. Here, give him to me, said the kisser. Zach was more than happy to get rid of him. As he did so, 2 more bums arrived. They were chunky, muscle-bound bums, and immediately began fighting over the seat cover. Slightly larger ones sat on it. The second bum picked it up, hurled it clean across the clearing, and then took its place on the cover. But the first bum wasn't about to be beaten so easily. It came running back across the clearing and kicked the other bum through the air. "All right," said the kicker under his breath. Zach was both amused and shocked. He always thought bums fought humans, not other bums. But the bum But the bum that had been kicked was not about to give up. It returned and they ended up grabbing each other like a pair of sumo wrestlers, the seat cover between them. Better stop before they exhaust themselves, said the kisser. Eleanor nodded and quietly forward, despite the claim of the net being too small, brought down easily over the pair. They struggled and fought to get out of the net until the kisser poked in his finger through the hole and tickled them, which instantly seemed to calm them down. The final 2 bums also appeared together, a pair of Siberian screaming bums. They created such an awful ear-piercing noise when captured, Zach had to stick his fingers in his ears. Smacker had to put both of the bums over her knee and smack them for a full 5 minutes before they would shut up. The 5 bums were all assembled on the ground and corked by the kisser, with the corks from the bum catcher's belt. Now watch closely, said the smacker. This is what we call a bum hopper. The average bum has enough gas to propel itself in the rider for about 20 minutes, but you don't let it all out at once. Why not? Said Zach. You've seen a balloon when you blow it up and let it go without tying the end, she said, making a raspberry noise and waving her arms about in the air. Zach grinned and nodded. Well, said the smacker, that's why you let out a little at a time, like this. She pulled the cork out slightly of one of the screaming bums, only a fraction of the screaming noise escaped. Just that much would be enough to send you over half a kilometer, she said. It's more like leapfrogging. Let out a bit, rise, fall, land, rise, and so on. Stops you getting too high, too fast. How do I steer? Said Zach. Smacker frowned. Normally, we have bridles, but we don't have any at the moment, so we're just going to have to pinch them. Pinch them on the right, and they'll veer left. Try and get away from the pain. Pinch the left cheek, you'll go right. 2 pinches either side will make you turn even sharper. Got that? The main thing to remember though is to not leave the cork out too long. Zach didn't know any more about flying bums than he did about flying bum mobiles. But it seemed pretty straightforward. Pinch right to go left, pinch left to turn right. Don't let out too much. What's so hard about that? Alright team, said the smacker once they were all mounted on their bums. We're going to try and bum hop our way to the coasts. We don't know how far we are, so we may need to stop and capture new bums. Keep together, watch out for low branches, and watch out for bum bogs. In saying that, the smacker reached behind, slowly tapped her cork, and immediately took off through the trees. Kicker was next, riding one of the screamers. Eleanor followed him on the other. You next, the kisser. Bum voyage. Zach reached around and pulled the cork out slightly, and took off into the trees with a whoosh. Before Zach knew it, he was heading straight towards a thick tree trunk. He pinched the left side of his bum hopper's cheek to go right, but he pinched the pimple by mistake. The bum flinched and let out a rush of gas. The bum hopper veered right, but too far right. He pinched the right side once more, but it veered left, too far left. He pinched the left side again, and accidentally pinched the pimple again. The bum flinched, shuddered, let out another burst of gas. This was bigger than the first. Zach went to jam the cork back in, but the cork was missing. The bum hopper was swerving left, right, up, down. It was completely out of control. Zach didn't know whether he was heading north, south, east, or west. In fact, it felt like he was traveling in all 4 directions at once. Zach gave up pitching and just hung on for his life. The bum hopper whooshed through the trees faster and faster, so he could hardly breathe, and then bam! Zach crashed into a branch. The bum shot out from under him. Zach grabbed frantically at the branch and held on for a moment. But it was slippery. It was covered in slippery brown moss, and he fell straight into a big soft pool of brown mud. Or at least he thought it was mud. But he wasn't. It was a bog. A bum bog. And Zach was right up to his neck. And I think there is the perfect cliffhanger to leave this part of the story on. I think. Okay, okay. Hello. I pressed the wrong. Yeah, that was the right button. Hello. It is me, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That was something fun, something a little bit different. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to do some more of that. Maybe on a later time. Maybe something middle of the week. Just jump on, read a book for an hour. To go for almost 3 hours though, it's not bad. And like I said, we're about 46% of the way through the book now, so I've only got a few more chapters left. But yeah, that's us done for today. I need to run off and do some stuff, so we'll quickly see if there's anyone live that we can raid. So give me 2 seconds while we have a look at that. But I really appreciate anyone who's here hanging out, whether you're lurking or anything like that, or watching this at a later date or time. So this is just a fun little idea that I had. So let's have a look. Is there anybody live yet? Yeah, I'm just looking at that. I'm like, have you put an announcement out on when you're starting yet? Nah, that's cool. We'll just wrap up here, I think, then. Methinks. Unless we go for... Let's go for something a little bit different, shall we? You know what? I'm following them already. Alright, let's do this. We're going to raid someone who's a member of the same stream team. Somebody new. So it's a slight change of scenery in what we're doing. They're playing some Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The perfect thing to follow up reading a book about bums is all about. So thank you all so very much for coming in and hanging out. Like I said, I really do appreciate you all for being here. Thank you for that follow. I appreciate you. Hope you have yourself a wonderful day. Once you follow us on social to know more about when we're going live next and to see some of our other content. And like I mentioned before, in regards to the grassroots, you've only got a little bit of time left to do that, and I really would appreciate the nomination if you want. It's entirely up to you. We're all adults here. Yeah. But anyway, friends, until next time, DFTBA. Good night.
Basic generic